Welcome, one and all. It is the post-mock draft episode. We're going to be on the decline until the NFL draft, aren't we? But in all seriousness, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to continue to bring you as much content as possible. We're going to squeeze a diamond out of this coal that is time before the draft happens, where we get reinvigorated with news once again around the NFL. And your favorite NFL podcast is here to do so. Welcome to episode 101 of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, ladies and gentlemen. As always, bring you into the show with a typical, monologue, dialogue, something O-log at this point. I'm sure there's a million different words I could describe the rambling I do at the start of all these episodes. It's Iceman Jurg bringing you all in. And of course, joining me, as always, on the show, the Games Master. We're taking a break from the games this week, though, ladies and gentlemen. But the Games Master himself, our guy, the Cody Rhodes of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Hey, it could be a good thing here soon,
Maybe.
Justin.
We'll
Justin, how we doing, brother?
I'm doing well. A little hoarse right now. Big Nick win. But doing good.
Yes. We're going to get Justin's live Knicks report later on the show, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you worry. We're going to have a little bit of fun in this one because as you guys can see, the Podfather is not here. Prior commitments, PTO, contractual things. We don't know what it is at this point. Podfather just didn't want to show up this week. He ran himself ragged for all the prep he did for his NFL mock draft. And the Michael Penix pick was the biggest win for him last week, so he decided to take this week off for that draft choice. But in all seriousness, Rick can't be here for real life reasons, and so it just leaves the two of us to do a little bit of a cleanup of sorts, ladies and gentlemen. So we talked about free agency a handful of times before the mock draft. We touched upon a couple things that happened around the league, or at least some situations during the mock itself last week, which if you want to look back upon, of course, the Sports Agents of Chaos YouTube channel, the whole shebang is there. And also it is on Twitter at JerdK40 itself. So you want to watch the selections we make. Did you like them? Did you not? Probably some of the picks we didn't like as we look back at it. We have a whole Google sheet that we could refer back to as we get closer to the draft. And maybe we could do like a fun, I don't think we got to do it last year, but maybe we could do like a fun comparison on certain things of who picked here versus what we like, who was picked here by this team versus who we decided to go with. And also how much trading up and down happened, which I think after this week, Justin, we'll get to have a little bit more fun talking specifically about the draft. I think we might have some draft-related episodes here, just discussion-based wise here in the coming weeks, because there's plenty to talk about this draft. I think even more than last year's draft, this is a discussion-heavy, speculation-heavy 2024 draft we're going into, which just makes it better for us because it gives us stuff to talk about on a weekly basis. So with that being said, Justin, are you ready to get to the cleanup of NFL free agency?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Yes. So, guys, we're going to go straight into the things. Fun football chaos. Let's go straight into the football this week. And let's talk about a trade that we discussed last week to an extent. We brought it up during the mock. We didn't get to go full into detail with either of these teams as we made these draft selections. So let's talk about it a little bit more here, Justin. But Stefon Diggs was dealt a little over a week ago at this point from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans. It was him and 2 late-round picks. One in this year's draft, I think, and one in next year's draft. I forget if it was the 5th this year and the 6th next year, if it's a vice versa in that situation. But it was Stefon Diggs and 2 late-round picks being sent over to the Houston Texans in exchange just for a singular second-round pick. A second-round pick, I believe, in next year's draft, so it didn't even affect our mock at all. Well, which we do appreciate, by the way. It made our lives easier last week, especially because we had divided up all the picks before that trade happened. So Stefon Diggs was traded, I don't want to say seemingly out of nowhere. Honestly, if you told me Stefon Diggs was going to get traded at the end of at the end of the run for the Bills this year, it wouldn't have surprised me. I think this was a long time coming to an extent. So that didn't necessarily surprise me. I think it was more other aspects about the deal itself that surprised me. So full details of the trade, as I just said, and also with Diggs' contract, the Bills took on a heavy dead cap hit for this upcoming season in order to facilitate the trade. And the Houston Texans in tow, them and Diggs' representation agreed to just tear up the rest of the deal. And it'll be 2024 is the lone season on this contract. So Stefon Diggs is going to be playing for one more big payday potentially here at the end of after 2024, going into the spring of 2025 and that free agency period. So a lot to digest there. We discussed a little bit of it, how big it is for Houston last week, and some of the picks made by this gentleman with me definitely were for show. Or actually, wait, was it you that had the Bills last week, Justin, or was it Rick? I forget.
It was Rick.
It was Rick. So I'll pull up the doc here in a moment to see what his picks were. See if the Bills should copy that or not. But Justin, your thoughts on the Stefon Diggs trade, what your level of potential shock was. And again, I think we kind of talked about it from the Houston side and how big it was for them. But if you want to say anything more about the Texans side of things, of course. But I think the big thing to key in on here is for the Bills, because that wide receiver room, Justin, I'm not going to lie to you, we might have a chance. We might have a chance.
Well, it's an interesting trade because it seems like they almost forced him out of there, which to me means that there was some sort of personality difference between him and Josh Allen or him and some of the coaching staff. And they're paying more in dead cap than they would have paid his salary this year. So it's an interesting move for them. And I get the idea of wanting to reset and rebuild. It's not like they got a lot for him. I mean, they traded a first for him. And I know that was a few years ago and he's coming off a down year, but it's a true rebuilding move for Buffalo. And it feels like they maybe could have gotten more for him and didn't want to trade him to certain places. It's interesting that they traded him to the Texans of all places now because that's in the conference. And if the Texans are good, that's a team they're going to have to go through. Now, if the Bills are not good this year, the good thing is the Texans voided the rest of his contract. So he's playing on a 1-year deal now and has the chance to come out smelling like a rose and signing a major long-term deal with a big-name team. It's going to be interesting to see his success there, especially with the deep wide receiver room that they already have. Because remember, they have Tank Dell there. They have
Nico Collins.
Yeah, they have a really, really deep wide receiving and a young wide receiving room of guys that really stepped up for them last year. So it's going to be interesting to see where he fits in. I don't know if they're going to slot him as the number 1 or the number 2. I would assume he's probably going to be the number 1, but the way that Nico Collins and Tank Dell played last year, and let's also not forget Noah Brown was solid there.
Yep.
And had a really, really big 4 or 5 game stretch when a lot of these guys were injured.
Yep.
And Robert Woods was also
Bobby Trees, the boy.
So it's going to be interesting to see where they slot him in. It's only going to help CJ Stroud, I'd imagine. The Texans made some very interesting all-in moves, including this one that really puts them, I think, as one of the front runners in the AFC. And they did it all without sacrificing a lot of future capital. Like all the contracts they signed, they're all 2-year contracts. Yep. They're prepared to pay whatever it takes to keep CJ Stroud when his contract is up. So interesting move on both sides. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Bills do in the draft now, because all of a sudden they have a lot of glaring holes. They had a few going into the offseason, and then they kind of just wiped the slate clean with a lot of the players that they had question marks about. Guys that were all pro but injured all the time, owed a lot of money and not living up to what they expected, and I'm not really sure where they go from here. Obviously, you have the foundation. You have Josh Allen. You have a decent offensive line, although you could make some improvements there. And the run game was solid last year. They lost their backup running back. Their wide receivers are going to be very different. They lost their top 2 wide receivers.
Yep.
And they lost a lot of players on defense. We'll see how it works out for them, but they're going to have to draft strong, and they're going to have an aggressive free agency in the next coming years.
Yeah, and they're going to need to be very precise, because looking back at the doc that we have from the mock last week, they only have 2 picks in the first 100 plus. And when you don't have as many selections to make up for the holes on your team, it really is going to force you to have to be you're going to have to trust your scouting department as the general manager of the Buffalo Bills. And you're going to have to hope that, whether it's a decision that is your choice ultimately, or it's a majority decision in the room, it's a matter of both confidence and being as sure as you can be that the kids that you're bringing in, especially these first 2 picks in this draft, the late first round pick and the late second round pick that you have, are going to make an impact for your team. And like you mentioned, this was already a team that it was going to be an already interesting draft, because, they let go of Mitch Morse, who was, pretty good, with the Bills. Made, I think, at least 1 All-Pro team with them, even in a Pro Bowl the last couple of years. He's now in Jacksonville. He was part of our free agency discussions that we had over the last couple of weeks. they let Gabe Davis go as well. They just let him walk in free agency, which I don't think is necessarily a negative thing because, in fact, you had at least the concept of Stefon Diggs. Now Stefon Diggs is gone, and that changes the thing. I will say really quick, just to keep it short and simple when it comes to the Texans, I think this was great by the Texans. Even if Diggs, a lot of people were talking about the fact that he didn't score a postseason touchdown for the Bills in the last couple of trips for them. Didn't have over, what was the threshold, like 75 or 80 yards over the last set of regular season games, and even in the playoff games that they had against the Steelers and the Chiefs. Like, yes, it was a rough 2023. I think we can all agree it was a rough 2023 for Stefon Diggs and probably a good chunk of that team overall. When you consider the turnovers that you were getting from the quarterback position and the level of play there, when you fire an offensive coordinator, it doesn't mean the offense is doing great, guys. Just a little bit of a concept there. But I think there were, the fact that you lost, you hit a reset. You talk about wiping the slate clean, Justin. They wiped the slate clean at least the entire defensive backfield. They did that. Let their veteran safeties both leaving. One of them might still be in free agency, but I know one of them signed in Miami. Tre'Davious White gone. He signed with the Los Angeles Rams. Like, you are restarting there with good, fine pieces, right? But nothing at the same high level of play as of now. Again, maybe these guys end up having breakthrough years with the Bills. To be fair, a couple of the guys that they had, right, like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde especially, he came over from the Green Bay Packers, who did not use him nearly as well as the Buffalo Bills were. The Bills turned him into a Pro Bowl caliber safety. He was not that on the Packers. So, there is some belief that the Bills can get a lot out of these guys. But it's almost going to be a case of you're going to rely on too many new faces. And is it going to be too much on these too many new faces to be able to help your team continue the standard? Which, for the Buffalo Bills, yes, you have had this rough offseason so far. But I think at least internal expectation, right? We could say whatever we want. We could think whatever we want about the Buffalo Bills going into next season. And don't worry, very much in the well, not near future, in the several months down the line future, AFC East preview is going to be a fun one, to say the very least. But the internal belief and the goal of that organization is to go deep in the postseason, is to overcome whatever demons they need to, and it's to get to the Super Bowl with this core. Whether we think that's realistic or not, or it doesn't matter. That's going to be the belief in it. And are there too many now pieces coming in? Just veteran-wise is one thing. But now you're going to rely on an extremely young wide receiver room to have to take up that load. And it's going to be difficult, right? Khalil Shakir is one of the more established players on that team. Doesn't have a lot of career receiving yards, does he? Now, he's had some flashes. I don't want to deny that. He had a couple flashes. But now you're going to go from being what was he last year? You think third, fourth, and just the wide receiver depth chart.
He might have been fourth last year. I mean, I'd have to look at the wide receiver depth chart that they had. But, yeah, I mean, he was not – I don't think they were expecting him to take on such a large load,
right.
At least anywhere in the season. And as of right now, ESPN's got him as their number one receiver.
And that's just a massive leap from a guy, like you said, number 3-4 last year. And it would have been one thing if he had to be the number 2, but Stefon Diggs is there still with his presence, with the abilities that he has shown on a relatively consistent basis throughout his career. It's one thing if Diggs had still been there. Now it's going to be Shakir, and you got to believe it's going to be a rookie wide receiver. And if not both of your first round picks, at least one of both of your first 2 picks, at least one of them, and especially your first, which, by the way, checking back on our mock last week, Troy Franklin, the wide receiver out of Oregon, was the selection by Rick to the Bills in our mock last week. So a little bit of a tease there for the people if they want to go back and see it. But just that kind of lets you know that I think it doesn't matter which 3 of us would have had the Bills pick. I think all 3 of us were going to go wide receiver in the first selection. And then Rick followed it up with a safety with their second round pick, because get a little bit more talent in that defensive backfield, to say the very least. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, obviously a rough end to things with Stefon Diggs. When you trade for a guy of that caliber, and I still think one of the best 50-50 trades in NFL history, because the pick you ended up trading, the Vikings didn't screw it up. They turned it into Justin Jefferson, who's been phenomenal so far. Now, how much longer his career is in Minnesota is a different conversation to have, but just ignore that for a moment. Justin Jefferson has been fantastic for the Minnesota Vikings in the time that he's been there. Stefon Diggs was fantastic for you in the time you were there. No matter what you want to say, he was good in Buffalo, right? You're Jets fan. We now have 2 Jets fans again on this podcast, but what we can. I'm very confident in speaking for you guys. Is you you were not happy to you're not sad to see Stefon Diggs go, Justin. You're very much more like, hey, yeah, he could leave the division. It's totally fine.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did it the year after we play the Texans. I don't think we're playing the Texans again this year. So
hopefully not. You know, those NFL schedule makers, man, they will get to cooking.
Yep.
But ultimately, a very intriguing move, and now the Buffalo Bills find themselves in this very intriguing position that, for all intents and purposes, a lot of people are going to end up doubting them going into this next season, and we're going to ultimately see, depending on what they do in the draft, if there's any last final free agency moves that could be made, because there are still free agents that are available. We're not going to get into that conversation this week because we need to save the content, but probably in future weeks down the line, we're going to go through the proper list here of what free agents are still available, and if any of them could end up making a difference for the Buffalo Bills, specifically for this team. So I think that just about wraps up. And again, I feel like I was going to talk about the Houston side of things, and I did a little bit, but then moved on to the Bills. But just real quick, I think you said a majority of it, Justin. Like, you're bringing in a number one caliber wide receiver into this room that already has some talented kids: Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Brown, as you said, from last year, the veteran Bobby Trees. But even, just past the wide receivers, you have a running back room there that just added Joe Mixon. You're hoping Damon Pierce could take a step back up to looking more like what he did his rookie year rather than his sophomore slump of a campaign last year. And you still have the reliable hands of Dalton Schultz. So there's a lot of weapons for Houston to play with just offensively. And then you mentioned the way they've built that team. Again, more conversation for future, but a dark horse to take one of the top 3 seeds in the conference, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I really don't. So, but again, that's more for down the line, more down in the offseason when it's time for us to
even be a dark horse at this point?
Probably not. I say dark horse just because we need to wait and see where everything else falls. But you tell me you want to put the Texans as what, the 3 seed in the conference right now? I would say maybe you could put them in the 2 seed, and I wouldn't necessarily give I wouldn't vehemently disagree. I think they made the necessary moves, and this happens the second you get that quarterback, man. The second you get the quarterback,
just changes everything.
Your entire franchise is different. So it's a phenomenal thing. We love to see it for the Houston Texans and what that franchise is doing. It's great stuff. Hopefully make the AFC much more competitive, especially the Bengals potentially coming back up with Joe Burrow. It's going to be good. Speaking of the Bengals here, Justin, let's have a go around a little bit, because this isn't more just necessarily free agency based, because let's be real here, a good chunk of the biggest moves have already happened. And I feel like we've done our due diligence with discussing a good amount of it. But I think more of the conversation now needs to be done is around the league. What stories, what little things have happened around the league that we need to discuss? And there's a couple wide receivers here that we can do some conversation with. Let's keep in the AFC first before we transfer over to the NFC side of it, with a young wide receiver that's due a payday here coming soon, Justin. But T. Higgins on his franchise tag, I had seen the headline, but you had given the detail about it before the show started, that T. Higgins officially said that he expects to be playing with the Bengals in 2024. Seems relatively cut and dry, but he is on the franchise tag. We know that he wanted to be traded earlier this offseason. And while it looks like as of now that has died down, I don't think this means teams are going to stop calling, to say the very least. I think the conversation could pick back up. So this is probably going to be the briefest conversation of these guys, but just your thoughts about T. Higgins. He is going to be a Bengal in 2024, but do you think there's a shot any of that changes? Or if not, if he is, is there any feasible way that the Bengals could find a way to keep him on the roster past 2024?
Well, they'd have to pay him, and that's the big question, because they're going to have to make sure that they have money set aside for Jamar Chase. And I think if you're choosing between the two at this point, they're probably choosing Jamar Chase. He's just been the guy that's been on the field a little more consistently. He's had a little bit better production. So it's certainly an issue if they want to keep T. Higgins. The issue also is they are missing Tyler Boyd now, who is also a free agent. He was another wide receiver that has gone over 1,000 yards for them a few times and has been, kind of that safety net for Joe Burrow when one of his 2 big guys isn't open. He can always find a big game out of T. Higgins. So I'm sorry, out of Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins too. So this is going to be a very interesting move. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft as well. This is another team that I could see drafting a wide receiver. They're not very wide receiver heavy. Their number 3 right now is Trenton Irwin, who was decent in spots last year, but he's not the guy that I expect them to be riding with all year long. they could be one of those teams, like we said, drafting a receiver. That would also maybe put them in position to possibly trade away T. Higgins
Right.
somewhere in the middle of the season if they can't agree to some sort of contract. I guess it's not impossible of them to franchise him twice, but I think that would be very heavily dependent on whether or not they could sign Jamar Chase to a long-term deal, because if they have to choose between the two of them, it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see them maybe signing Jamar and then franchising T. Higgins again, but then you run the risk of now T. Higgins wanting to hold out, not wanting to play. You create a distraction, and you don't want a distraction. You want Joe Burrow to be healthy. You want that team to be focused, and you don't want this to become a circus. So they have a lot of issues on the defensive side of the ball too, but you don't want the offense to start causing headlines like this.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, professional sports, and I don't say this word in a negative connotation, but ego gets in the way. And at the end of the day, if you're T. Higgins, you've been pretty successful so far for a second round wide receiver.
Yeah,
You've
dude
done
deserves to get
shown
paid.
amazing things. 100%. And hitting the open market properly, a team will pay him to be a number one wide receiver. And he's shown flashes to be a number one wide receiver. I think there's still a chance he could get dealt. Now, I'm iffy on it because I think the Cincinnati Bengals have kind of shown like they're willing to just let guys' contracts play out and let them walk. They did it this past year with Jonah Williams. Now, granted, offensive line, they've needed that, so maybe it was the thing for them to keep him through the fold despite the fact. But we've known since last year Jonah Williams was always going to leave that team at the conclusion of the 2023 season because they moved him to right tackle because they brought in Orlando Brown Jr., right? Like, it's just those things. And the Bengals seem like very cool with, okay, we're not going to move him. He's going to be a member of the team for this year. Boom, that's it. And like you said, at the end of the day, it's just not feasible that they're going to be able to pay both of them. And if they're going to make that decision, I think they probably are just going to end up picking Jamar Chase because I think, and I'm not saying Joe Burrow doesn't love T. Higgins, but Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are boys. And if you don't think Joe Burrow is going to have any semblance of conversation when it comes to Jamar Chase's contract, it's going to get done. And I promise you, Joe Burrow is going to play a role into it for sure. So I think that T. Higgins, he's been great in Cincy so far. I think he's going to have a phenomenal 2024 if they do end up retaining him. And I think it's just going to be a simple, can't keep you. Kumbaya. We had a 2024 season. Best case scenario for the Bengals. T. Higgins plays for you, does phenomenal, helps you win a Super Bowl, leaves and gets his money. Yes, he left. That sucks. You got a Super Bowl out of it. Right? Like at the end of the day, that's just the tax that you have to pay. It's if you keep guys, you pay them a little bit extra. If you lose guys, it's because you weren't able to afford them because their value went up. That's just the ebbs and flows of everything in every single sport, every single league. When you win, when championships are won, everyone's price goes up. When championships are won, importance goes up. And if you're the Bengals, like the prospect of losing T. Higgins sucks at the end of 2024. You know how you make it worth it? Win. just win. So I don't think the Bengals are going to trade him. If they do, like more power to them. Probably what most would consider a right decision. But I'm kind of leaning towards they're going to keep him in the fold. He's going to have a great 2024 campaign. They're going to have a good 2024 bounce back year if everyone is firing on all cylinders and healthy. And I think Cincy is going to be dangerous once again going into the things on the AFC side. Now let's go to the NFC side because a certain wide receiver, he also wants to get paid. From a team that recently won on a Super Bowl run and fell just short. Amazing some of these parallels we draw, even in situations where it doesn't merit it. Yeah, well, it kind of does. And by the way, real quick for the Bengals, I'm not going to say who, but there was a wide receiver mock drafted by the Bengals in our mock last week. I'm not going to give you that one. You have to actually go back to the mock and watch that to see who it was. But let's go to the NFC side thing. NFC side here, Justin. The San Francisco 49ers also have a wide receiver that they need to figure out a contract for, right? Brandon Ayuk has been phenomenal, was amazing for them last season. Played a key role in the Super Bowl, and some would say probably should have thrown two more in the big game, guys, because it felt like every single catch he made in the Super Bowl was a first down. And even this past season, like, what was it, Justin? The craziest at the start 2023, like through the first half of the season, like, what was it? 2/3 of all his catches were either a first down conversion or a touchdown. It was something.
I think in the first 4 to 6 games, every catch he had was either a first down or a touchdown.
It's amazing. It's just absolutely absurd.
I mean, he started off on a tear. Yeah. I can bring up my old fantasy team because I was winning games with him left and right. But yeah, he was. I mean, I think the first 2 weeks he had 4 touchdowns and almost 300 yards, and then his touchdown numbers kind of slowed, and teams got hurt, and they were kind of relying on him very heavily. So his numbers kind of dipped in the middle,
Yep.
And Debo came back and Kittle came back and things were going well. He was back up top. And look, he's now for the second year in a row, 1,000-yard receiver for them. He does a lot. He spreads the field. He's the only true wide receiver I feel that they have. Because Debo, don't get me wrong, Debo is an excellent player all around, but he's more of a hybrid kind of just get him the ball. He reminds me more of like a Percy Harvin than a true receiver.
Yep.
And that's not an insult to Percy Harvin or Debo Samuel. They're both excellent football players, some of the best I've ever seen. But so
man, prime Percy Harvin, that was different.
Yeah.
What a beast he was.
So the question now is, what do you do if you're San Francisco? Because you have major cap issues. This is a guy that is definitely owed a pretty penny. You're going to have to pay your quarterback eventually, and you're going to have to figure out how to fit your cap issues because for the last, I don't know, 5 years, you've paid a big name guy a lot of money.
Yep.
I mean, we can keep going back. It was Debo, then it was McCaffrey or vice versa. They paid Kittle.
Yep.
They paid
Trent Williams.
Trent Williams. They paid Bosa. They found ways to get these guys paid. Where does Brandon Ayuk fit in here?
Right. And I think that's a big thing right there, Justin, because is he going to fall on the list of names that they have paid, or is he going to end up falling on the list of names that they had to let go and just let walk? Because for all the guys that we've said, I think there's some parallels here because for every Debo Samuel and Trent Williams that they've had, there's the Mike McGlinchey who left before last season, right? And he got a massive payday to be the right tackle of the future for the Broncos. For Nick Bosa, who they probably were planning out after his Defensive Rookie of the Year campaign, they were going to give this contract to. There was DeForest Buckner had to be traded to the Indianapolis Colts. So there's all these things for if we really break it down for maybe it's not exactly a 1-for-1, maybe it's more of like a 2-for-1 to an extent. But for every big signing or two that they were able to do, they had to give up a name along the way. And like you said, they've been able to get by it because, let's be real here, luck of the draw. They got their franchise quarterback with the very last possible pick, and they have to pay him what I honestly still doubt, even after taxes, is a livable wage in the state of California, considering how expensive everything is. But I'll still assume Brock Purdy's making a decent chunk of change, especially because it was a couple weeks ago. It's guys getting, I didn't even know this was a thing, guys getting paid extra for outperforming their base contract, and Brock Purdy got a pretty decent payday out of it. So good job for Brock. Aaron Rodgers got $40, so that pays for one McDonald's meal at this point in we live in today. But jokes aside, this is a San Fran team that has been able to kind of survive with some of the tough choices that they've had to make, and it's not hurt the roster to a massive extent. Well, but I think what you were alluding
more than survive, though. I mean, they get better every year. They're a Super Bowl contender. The question is now, this is a major piece. And how do you either supplement your salary cap to make sure he fits in or supplement your roster to make sure you're not missing him?
Yeah. And it's going to have to take, no matter which way you go, it's going to be if you do keep Ayuk, you're going to sacrifice one of the big pieces you have. Or if you are going to make peace with the fact that you're going to have to let Ayuk go, it might be the smartest thing to do. As I mentioned with Cincy was more than fine with, last year with Jonah Williams, now this year potentially with Higgins of let the season play out. Will San Fran do that? Because they traded Buckner before they really had to do it. They were able to get that trade done in relative short order. This is a team that might be willing to make this trade if they don't think that it can happen. Now, over the last 24 hours, it doesn't look like there will be one because Brandon Ayuk's agent himself responding to a tweet about a trade saying that you better check your sources again, Chief, because they aren't good ones. So as of now, it seems that there is no trade request from Brandon Ayuk, his agent, in his camp. But let's be real here. Would you really want the world to know that there was one? So I think it's something to kind of take with a grain of salt to an extent right now. I don't want to necessarily call an agent a liar. But at the same time, you do what's best for your client. And I think the best thing is right now, see if you can get San Fran to pay now. Or, maybe he's trying to help San Fran because, do you really want the world to know that Ayuk wants to be dealt right now? I don't know. It's a whole machination. It's games behind the scenes, right? It's this kind of stuff that, they're saying one thing, let's be real here. It's probably the other. So I think it's ultimately going to be, but what I was saying before is that this could end up being the trade potentially that is this the player, and it might sound I'm really putting Brandon Ayuk up here, but like just stay with me here. Is this the player where if they decide to let him go, like what is there on the roster right now? And kind of what I was talking about with the Bills, right? With trading Stefon Diggs and needing to make sure you hit on your picks. If you're making peace, if San Francisco right now is close to making peace with the fact that whether it be now in a trade or even this time next year that they're not going to have him on the roster anymore, how are you going to, as you said, make that decision and then supplement the talent? What wide receiver are you looking at right now in this draft that you think that kid is going to get this year, right, to be in the background because you still have your big guns, right? And then next season, 2026, I can do that. Or wait, no, dang, 2025, he steps up into that big role, taking a spot. Or if it's the other way, you're keeping Ayuk, but you got to let someone go. Is there someone that can fill in the Debo role? Maybe is he the odd man out potentially? You know, then you have to start having the conversation of who else on that team is going to be the odd man out. And we're focusing on the offense because I think it might realistically be the offense that takes a hit, whether it's going to be Ayuk leaving in the future or if it's someone else that has to go to keep him there. I don't think it's going to be the defense. I kind of don't think they can afford that on the defense right now because Warner and Bosa are your key pieces, but Greenlaw is going to be out for the entire year. So you kind of need all hands on deck defensively right now to step up because you've also kind of missed on a couple of your defensive draft picks now. Let's not forget. I know this one is going way, way back, but Solomon Thomas was not a good draft pick from this team. He's a fine role player now, but he was not. What was he? A top 3 pick? Top 4 pick?
Yeah, I think he was. They traded back with the Bears. They were the number 2 overall pick.
Trubisky. Oh,
and
Lord.
The Bears got Trubisky, and then they drafted Solomon Thomas.
Oh boy. So from Diggs and Jefferson to Solomon Thomas and Mr. Trubisky, what a difference in player. But you missed on the Solomon Thomas selection. You missed on the defensive lineman that you drafted. I think it was the exact same offseason you let go of Buckner. And I'm only just generally speaking defensive lineman because for the life of me, I continuously confused if it was Kinlaw or Chason, but I think it was Kinlaw who they drafted.
He's a Jet now.
Yeah, exactly.
Both of those players are Jets. Both Kinlaw and Thomas.
That's ironic. And who's your head coach? Former DC.
So I guess it makes sense.
Familiarity, it breeds confidence. But I think if you're San Francisco here, like I don't think it's shrewd of us to assume that if Ayuk, whatever his future holds, whatever his fate is going to end up being, it's going to impact the offense more than anything. Because I think it's especially clock's ticking, big clock Brock. He's going to be doing a contract here a calendar year from now. You got to have the discussion. And then where does he go in the payroll? And then, because I think you were mentioning it, Justin, where does he slot in? I think you're doing this double time right now. You're just not thinking about the Ayuk contract if you pay him. You got to think about what Brock's contract might be. So it's quite the situation San Fran is in. And hey, look, man, at the end of the day, here's the thing. You're a really good team if we're talking about this situation. Like,
it's San Fran position to be in. I mean, obviously, you'd rather be talking about this situation coming off a Super Bowl win, but it's still a pretty solid situation to be in. Second best, I guess. Silver medal.
So, silver medal, which is kind of what some of these teams have had to settle for over the last 4 years because, good Lord, Kansas City. But hey, this is what happens when you go deep. You have success. And again, Brandon Ayuk should have thrown to him more. Should have game planned that more. Kyle Shanahan, you brainiac. You should have gotten your number 1 guy more. But regardless, we're not here to break down that film 2 months after the fact. We could. But it's going to be a very interesting, next couple of weeks going into the draft for San Francisco, for really a couple of these teams that we've already discussed so far, for the Bills, for the Bengals, for the Niners, and see what they end up doing and not doing. So there's that situation. So a lot of questions in the air. Let's get to some guys that actually, well, one of them put pen on paper properly, and the other one kind of fixed the paper that his pen is already dried on. That's a very weird way to say that we're going back to the AFC because Nick Chubb restructured his deal with the Cleveland Browns. Hey. I barely had an idea where I was going there for a second as well, but then I remember.
Yes.
So Nick Chubb and the Cleveland Browns agreed to a restructured contract for this upcoming season. I believe I don't know if it was a year thing. I think he always had just the 1 year left, but it was an ultimately reworked deal with the running back that he ensures that he's with the team for the 2024 season. According to reports, they reduced his salary cap hit from the $15.85 million it was going to be down to $6.275, and he could potentially earn up to a little over $12 million next season based on performance level incentives that he's going to have. It's saying based on performance levels he was achieving prior to the season-ending injury, so maybe they're like kind of projecting to what last year could have been and adding those incentives in. Big one, I'm sure, is based off of games played and probably yardage because Nick Chubb, before the injury last season, 4 straight seasons of at least 1,000 rushing yards in Cleveland, which phenomenal. And and it could have been 5 because his rookie year, the lone full season, he didn't get 1,000 yards, 4 yards short, 996 yards short of 1,000 rushing yards. And if you want to, he's not much of a receiving back, but if you want to cheat and say add in the receiving yards, over 1,000 yards from scrimmage every single year of his career, well over that in some seasons. So Nick Chubb, restructured, reworked deal. Justin, we talk about what teams are having to do in terms of figuring things out around their quarterback. The Browns are doing a similar thing, but this ain't Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Brock Purdy. This is the big mega colossal deal that you gave to no, I'm not going to make the joke. You gave to Deshaun Watson, and now your roster, to an extent, has to, I don't want to say pay a price because obviously Nick Chubb is still on the team for 2024, but now it's going to be questions on what is his long-term future with the Browns, because are they going to be willing to pay him after this season is the question. I know it's based off of what his performance will be in 2024, but I'm for the running backs, hashtag pay the dang running backs. But in terms of like focusing on the Nick Chubb situation here and this rework deal, Cleveland, great season, right? Like they were better than even I gave credit for. Like I already had relatively high expectations of them going into 2024. I thought they were just going to be, threatening for a playoff spot at the end. They make the playoffs, got trounced in the wild card round by the Houston Texans. Funny enough, see, look at that, everything connects. And this is a team that obviously you want more, you want aspirations, you want to be able to win some playoff games here with Deshaun Watson. You didn't just pay him all that money to just get to the playoffs. The previous guy you had won you a playoff game. You got to go past that now. So what does this move tell you about the outlook of the Browns for 2024, Justin?
Well, the Browns as a whole, there's a lot of question marks because of the quarterback situation. And they were very heavily reliant on their running backs last year. Nick Chubb going down was a devastating injury, not just for the Browns, but for football in general. You got to hope he can come back strong. Every year he goes down, it hurts just a little bit more because, it's that much closer just to being the last time he's going down. Unfortunately, we football is better when Nick Chubb is healthy because that kid can really pound that ball. He's an excellent running back, and frankly, what I think is an underrated running back. In terms of Cleveland, it's going to come down to what Deshaun Watson is going to be, because as great as Nick Chubb was, they still have a solid running game without him. They have a good offensive line. They have fairly good receivers. I mean, Elijah Moore is the 3, Jerry Jeudy is now the 2 after that big trade, and they have Amari Cooper. David Njoku is still there, who had a much, much better offensive season last year. I mean, he's always been there solidly, like as a solid player, but he was much more consistent on the field last year in terms of offensive production. And it's really going to come down to, can they keep a healthy quarterback on the field and playing well? And let's face it, even when Deshaun Watson was on the field last year, they didn't look great offensively. The games where they could run the ball, they won. And the games where they could not run the ball, they struggled because Deshaun Watson and whoever was playing at quarterback was turning the ball over. They did sign Jameis Winston to a backup deal, which could, possibly help them. Maybe they don't have to go through 5 quarterbacks last year that started for them.
Correct.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the schedule comes out, which I'm very excited to see. I was talking about last night with a couple of friends. It's going to be interesting to see who they play when they play them, because if they start out, as a rough early defensive schedule, maybe you wait on bringing Nick Chubb back. I mean, I don't know what the status of his injury is going to be. I know he got hurt about halfway through the season last year. What is he going to do, and what he's going to be able to physically do to help them out? Now, the defense is still going to be a strong defense. They were excellent last year. Zadarius Smith maybe stays healthy this year, and they are scary. Yeah. So I don't really have any issues on the defensive side of the ball. What are they going to be at quarterback? That's really going to determine what their whole season is.
Yeah, 100%. I think his performance and the support he needs, like you said, the more support he can get, the better. Nick Chubb being back in the fold. And it was pretty early last year when he did get that injury. So as of now, if I had to guess, I think they're projecting him to be back properly for preseason and training camp. It would surprise me if he doesn't start week 1. like you said, maybe it depends on the schedule. Maybe they try to go more, spread out in the running back room going into week one, the early weeks on the schedule, and then letting him be that bell cow back when they need him to the most when it starts to hit that middle of the season point. Obviously, we'll wait to see how that ultimately gets deployed, but a big thing here, keeping Nick Chubb on the roster was the most important thing. And like you said, Deshaun Watson just did not play well last year. And now you're in the situation where we were talking about some of these other quarterbacks. We're actually kind of talking about this with Cincy to an extent, because now you have Joe Burrow signed. We know Jamar Chase is going to get his contract. Now, where do the rest of the pieces fall around those two, them being the centerpiece? Whereas Deshaun Watson, he has to be the centerpiece. He hasn't played like centerpiece in Cleveland yet. So you're hoping that he could take that next level. And the way that you help your quarterbacks is that you put as many pieces around them as you can. It's just funny. We normally talk about that with a young quarterback, not a guy that's done it before. But I guess to be fair, old buddy, he still needs a little bit of help out there. Still getting back into the fold of things to an extent. So it's a very interesting thing to see. I would say for Nick Chubb, he's 28. He's going to turn 29 towards the end of this upcoming regular season. He's going to, it looks like, hit free agency after 2024, so going into 2025. I hope he bounces back from a strong year. I think he will. Like you said, there's still a strong defense. Well, there's a good defensive line there, but there's also a strong offensive line there in Cleveland that's going to play support, because they missed the dynamic playmaking ability of Chubb, but they still got decent play out of their running backs. Ford last year,
they were decent in terms of running the football last year, even without Nick Chubb. Yeah. Having Nick Chubb is a major thing, but it's it's not like they were out of commission without him.
Oh, yeah, they could still run it. I just think it's the explosiveness and the big play potential. Like, I think the biggest example that you could just point to, what was the Minnesota Vikings rushing attack this season post Dalvin Cook? Now, I know Dalvin Cook did not have a banner 2023, so I guess in theory you could try to say, did the Vikings know what they were doing? I would argue the fact that he still could have helped that team in 2023. It's just one of those things where Alexander Mattison, he had a decent year, but he got cut. Right? Like the Vikings could technically, anyone can run the ball. Like, I feel like that's a term that we start to over dramatize that. I definitely screwed up that sentence. We start to make hyperbole of it. It's like, they can run the football. We're only talking about them running the football when they're having a really great game on the rushing. At the end of the day, everyone can run the football. It's about how good are you at doing it, how effective are you, and can your running game be extremely explosive? They had a good rushing attack. Absolutely. You take away Chubb's yards, they still had, I believe, if my Steiner mathematics are doing good, they still had, I think, just under 1,900 yards rushing without taking away Nick Chubb's small amount that he had, because, again, he got injured super early last year. So they were still a good team with it. You can't deny that. But I would also say you put that explosive big playability back in. That's what you need if you're Cleveland. I think that's what you need if you're Deshaun Watson, because you get to rely on a running back like that. Because he had over 100 yards in the season opener against Cincy, and that was a big win for Cleveland. So I think it's going to be a big thing for Chubb coming back. I hope he has a great season. I hope he can hit into the 2025 offseason, get one last contract for himself for his career. Maybe a little bit more sizable than what Derrick Henry got. Maybe it'll be around the same thing. We'll see what happens ultimately, just from a Nick Chubb perspective. But I hope he absolutely has a massive 2024. And if you're the Browns, you're hoping for the same thing, obviously, right? It's interconnected. It's ultimately interconnected. But the Browns did get to rework the contract, so Nick Chubb is back in the fold fully and properly for 2024, and we'll see what other moves that team will make and what improvements they can make in the draft. Because it's a pretty good roster, but obviously it's not faultless. If you're faultless, I can't even say if you're faultless, you win, because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us would say the Chiefs were faultless last year. They just played the best possible football at the best possible time of this year. But sometimes it's all it takes. Sometimes it's all it takes. Let's talk about a team, though, Justin, that 2023 was not a year that they wanted to remember. Coming in with the expectations of winning the division to not winning the division, the 9-8 Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a rough 2023 for them after the promise of what was 2022, winning the division the way they did. Good first 10, 11 games, and then just completely fell apart for Jacksonville after that. So now you're looking to a offseason where questions are asked, they need to be answered for 2024, because now you have this young Houston team on the horizon on one side of you. And on the other side of you, the Colts just barely missed out on making a playoff run of themselves, maybe potentially last year. So how do you do that? How are you going to help your case? You keep into the fold a guy who's really helped your team the last couple of years, especially on the defensive sack production side. 17.5 sacks for Josh Allen last year. And what did that give you, good sir? 5 years, $150 million contract, $88 million guaranteed according to when it was signed. So Josh Allen massively, and I think there were some questions about this team's pass rush going into last season. And you need to see more consistency out of them. You definitely got it out of Allen, but you also started to see a little bit more. Trevon Walker finally showing why there was a reason that why they picked him as high as they did. He had a double-digit sack campaign. I think he just got to 10 last year for the Jags. This was a massive thing for this team in a when you're entering a draft where we kind of talked about last week, like as good of players as there is in Jacksonville, there's still very much a need to improve part in the margins, part getting more starters on that squad. And it's always nice when you have to worry about one less guy that can really contribute to the team, Justin. So 5 years, 150 million for Josh Allen. Massive for Jacksonville as they are looking for a massive bounce back in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major thing for them to keep him in the fold. I mean, he's quietly been one of the best defensive ends in football since he's been drafted. Really, he's been excellent. He's been a major part of what they've done and where they've been able to go. The issue last year again was the health of the quarterback. I mean, Trevor Lawrence clearly was playing in some games he probably shouldn't have been playing in, just to try and keep his team in the fold. They had a lot of other major injuries that I'm not going to cover today, but I expect them to bounce back next year. I mean, they're going to bring in some guys to help them. ETN, I expect to have another great year. They've brought in some receiver help, albeit, I mean, it's probably not Calvin Ridley last year, but they'll have Gabe Davis. They still have Zay Jones, who missed some time last year and was up and down. And they'll draft some guys too. Their offensive line should be healthy again. I really expect them to have a much better year this year than they did last year. And keeping that defense where it is, that was a major accomplishment.
Yeah. And you keep a guy like that because there's another team that recently lost their pass rusher here recently that had to trade him for a second-round pick. So the Jags didn't have to do that in any way, shape, or form. No, they were always going to keep Josh Allen in all seriousness there. And it was I don't even know if coup would be the proper word, really. I don't think it's necessarily a need to be able to say that because I think it was well within the plans of what they were going to do. But this is obviously, you mentioned that defense. I don't think, like you said, defense wasn't the problem last year. It was just the injuries that they dealt with, I think, especially on the offensive end, where we could say that other pieces got injured on that team. But I think ultimately it did come down to the fact that Trevor Lawrence was dinged up, and you saw the massive difference that made when Trevor Lawrence was at the peak of his powers. They were going, and it looked like they were going to be very comfortably in the playoffs. So when he gets hurt, out. Not great, to say the very least, for the team. So you keep a guy in place for a long time. Trevor Lawrence is going to be the next guy up in that in regards to Jacksonville and what they're going to end up doing. And ultimately, getting back into the fold in what is looking like a competitive AFC. And this has been a majority AFC episode so far. Like, we've talked about the Bills and them trying to bounce back. We talked about the Browns and, them reworking Nick Chubb into the fold with his contract. You have the Cincinnati Bengals, and they want to bounce back. Obviously, they firmly believe they're Joe Burrow injury away from last year from returning to the postseason. This is going to be another competitive season in the AFC, man, where what did we talk about last year? There's going to be 9 playoff caliber teams in the AFC, and 2 of them are going to have to miss out because only 7 can make it. I think we're starting to trend. Again, we'll wait to make our full assessments a little bit after the draft, of course. But I think we're starting to trend that way again here, Justin, because you have the Chiefs, you have the Ravens, right? Like the 2 teams in the AFC title game. You start with those 2. You have the Texans, right? You believe that the Jaguars, as you said, can bounce back. I definitely think they can. We believe the Bengals can potentially bounce back in the fold. They can. The Dolphins, who made it last year. The Jets, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy. We're already at 7. We're already at 7.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a tough conference.
It's going to be interesting. There are teams that were underperforming last year, also that we haven't spoken about. Teams that had like little win streaks that showed flashes of things and have been good in the past and still have a good core. I mean, let's look at the Chargers. I expect the Chargers to bounce back. The Broncos, depending on their quarterback situation, they could be a decent team this year. They won. They have a 6-game winning streak in the middle of the season last year. Like, they have good pieces that are there. Even the Steelers. The Steelers were doing everything they had with issues at quarterback, legitimate issues. now they arguably have a Hall of Famer. I mean, maybe he's past his prime. We're going to see if there was an issue in Denver, if there was an issue with him. But Pittsburgh might have a real quarterback now.
Yep. And even if
scary prospect,
even if it's not the potential future Hall of Famer, let's pump the brakes there. But even if it's not that guy, there's a former first-round pick that they also brought into the fold. Who that kid can run for 1,000 yards while also throwing in the air too. Like that. Now you could have there. I'm just saying, like there's some potential there in Pittsburgh, which we did have that full breakdown a couple weeks ago. Go back to that episode if you want more of that. But Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, it's going to be very interesting to see which one of them establishes themselves early in Pittsburgh and how that season ebbs and flows for them. It's amazing. And can you just imagine, Justin, if you get the right offensive coordinator? Oh, wait, it's Arthur Smith. Okay. You can't win them all, Pittsburgh. You can't win them all. So it's been a predominantly AFC episode. So, as we wind down the time here for the NFL, for the free agency portion of things, let's go kind of back to the NFC just for a little bit of stuff. I mean, now this team, I'm not necessarily going to speak about signings. It's more of a lack thereof. Justin, it was kind of a joke for part of this offseason. The Dallas Cowboys didn't do much.
Much.
Yeah, and maybe part of that, like, there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. There's the fact that the Dallas Cowboys, like, their cap situation, not, they did, I think, a bit of restructuring, I think, going into the offseason, if memory serves. It wasn't the worst, but I want to say there was at least one or two deals that they had to rework. There is the idea, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily, it's not affecting this year's cap necessarily, but, well, to an extent, it could. The Dak Prescott's future, like, how long is he going to be in Dallas? I think that was a discussion that came up in a moment in this early portion of the offseason. Well, early mid portion, if we're being honest here. And so there were those discussions. They kind of did some stuff. It was the funniest thing is Eric Kendricks went to San Fran first, and then he decided to shift back to Dallas, so he ends up going there. And they made a couple other small signings here. No, I don't say no big names as a negative to them. I didn't have the expectations they were going to go for big names because I think for the most part, Dallas's money is where they kind of want it to be, right? Like they didn't do a lot, but did we expect them to do a lot? I don't know about you. What did you make of their like kind of subtle offseason, basically?
Well, they had holes, and they didn't replace some of the guys that they lost. I mean, Leighton Vander Esch, unfortunately, has a career-ending issue, and he's gone for the year. He's gone for the year. He's gone forever from them. They lost Tony Pollard in free agency. They lost Tyron Smith in free agency. Like their offensive line isn't what it was. Their running game isn't what it was. These are staples of Cowboy offense that just aren't there anymore. So where are you going to replace this offense? Now, I mean, Jake Ferguson had a good year last year. Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb had a good year last year. I expect Dak Prescott to play at an all-pro level again last year. I mean, there were some games. It's funny because if he doesn't like blow like 2 or 3 games, like not back to back, but like towards the end in the second half of the year last year, he's the MVP by a lot.
Yeah.
There's like 1 or 2 games that really got in there and like screwed him up. And then
it was back to back the Bills and the Dolphins games where in those 2 games total, he only had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception through the air.
Yeah, and like not a ton of yards, and they lost both of those games.
Yep.
It was a tough stretch for them at the end of the year, and obviously it was tougher than it was in the beginning of the year because they had a much easier schedule going down. But they won their division, and now they've seemingly lost some major pieces. This is why people were hypothesizing about maybe a potential Ezekiel Elliott reunion in Dallas because they need a running back.
Right.
Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn might be good, but we're very unproven right now in their running back.
Yeah, they're kind of like they're the AFC Buffalo Bills wide receiver room for the NFC basically. Like it's fine, but there's just nothing like even Vaughn. He didn't do anything.
The Buffalo Bills are like devoid of a true number 1 receiver. They have CeeDee Lamb. And
no. I'm saying the Cowboys running backs are that of what like wide receiver.
Okay.
Like they're like
I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I explained it terribly, most likely. But like that's what I mean, where it's like Khalil Shakir is kind of what I'm not gonna lie, I kind of forgot who's the Dallas
Rico
Cowboys.
Dowdle.
Yes, like they're kind of equals to an extent. Like
Yeah, like guys that came in, they performed well, but I don't think they were expected to be the number one guy coming into the season this year.
definitely.
So we're gonna see if they make some moves in the draft and exactly where they go. But like there's some issues. And I don't necessarily know if there's an Ezekiel Elliott or like a top running back like that in the draft that I expect them to take. You know, we haven't really spoken about the running backs coming out this year.
Right.
It's more receiver and quarterback heavy.
And even in the mock last week, we didn't. I don't think we were anywhere near picking a running back in the first round.
No, I think the first one was almost in the third.
I'll double check it for us.
It was late. I remember Rick picked one right before I was about to pick one, but it was late. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And now we're gonna have to answer a bunch of questions on defense. Like I know that Micah Parsons is there. He's got to get paid soon. We're getting Trayvon Diggs back, but what is that secondary? Are they the boomer bust secondary that we saw last year, where it was either a major interception or a pick six or like a huge play, or they gave up 500 yards in a game? You know, there are some major glaring issues. And look, I can't sit here and tell you that I think that it would have been solved by free agency. I'm not sure that the Cowboys did the wrong thing by not really addressing anything, but it's hard to argue that you're going to be better than you were last year when you lose some major production players and you don't really do anything to get back.
Right,
guys.
right. And looking at the mock last week, 56 overall was where we had our first running back. So, ironically, to the Cowboys, Rick picked the first running back, and he picked Jonathan Brooks from Texas to end up going to Dallas. So, I mean, maybe that is something they end up doing with the second round pick there. And if they do, we'll take credit right there for our mock. But it's certainly, and like you said, I think that's the perfect way to describe it. It's like it's not necessarily a bad thing that didn't use free agency to fix the issues, right? Maybe they just didn't see that it's a more than fair thing where the Dallas Cowboys maybe assess things and they just didn't see the answer to a handful of these issues in free agency, at least at the start. Again, you can always pick guys up, and there's still a couple names left, right? Like they can bring a guy in going into training camp. Like I think it's just ultimately going to be the question of, whoever you are going to bring in, are they going to be able to step up? It's kind of been the theme for some of these conversations with some of these teams. It's like Bills, wide receivers, who's going to step up for you? Cincinnati Bengals, are you going to have that big year? San Fran, who's going to potentially step up depending on when you make this move, right? Like, it's a lot of these who needs to step up in these places conversation. First off, I like it because we could get surprise stories. We could see guys just break off for an amazing year. Deuce Vaughn might come out for like 800 rushing yards this year for all we know, like as the second running back. He might do it. That'd be massive.
Absolutely. I'm not like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from the guys that they have on the roster. These are guys that are fine players. They're excellent NFL talent. I would be happy if they were like on my team in certain spots and positions, but it's just for the Dallas Cowboys, they're coming off a run where they had Ezekiel Elliott and then Tony Pollard.
Yep.
And even though Pollard had a down year last year as the number one guy and they ended up letting him go in free agency, they're still coming off of powerhouse running game.
Yep.
And
even before Zeke, it was DeMarco Murray who led the league in yards one year, or like was second or third. Like
no, they've always had good running backs there.
Yeah.
So it's been instrumental for what Dak has been able to do for you. And as much as you want to criticize him and put him down, not you specifically, I'm talking about everyone in general, because there's lots of criticisms for Dak. No matter who you are, he can't win the big game, blah blah blah. He's instrumental in keeping that Cowboys team where it is.
Yep.
He was the reason they won the division last year. Plain and simple. Dak Prescott.
Yep.
So now the question becomes, how do you supplement what was something that was so pivotal and so instrumental in Dak Prescott's success, which is a great running game and keeping the pressure off of him when he needs it? And then I'm not sure you have the answers right now. Like I said, these guys might be fine backups. I don't know what they're going to be as a starter. And honestly, I don't think that anyone's sitting there calling out and being like, oh man, these guys are going to have real good years. Like there are certain backups where like they were unproven, but you expected a lot. Like the Jets traded for Chris Ivory. It's just the first thought that comes to mind. Chris Ivory was a backup running back for the New Orleans Saints and didn't really have a ton of experience as a starter. He was a tough, violent downhill runner, and people saw flashes of something great, and they said, this kid is going to be great.
Yep.
I don't know that you see that with any of these guys in Dallas, in more than one position that they're lacking, and that's where it becomes an issue. And you start to say to yourself, why didn't they make any free agent? Derrick Henry wanted to play for Dallas.
Yeah. And what do you say?
Came
He
out and
never got
said
a
it. He said
call?
that was my ideal situation. They didn't even call him.
Yeah, that's wild. That's absolutely wild to me.
So I don't understand what they're doing. Like I said, it might be the right move. I'm not sure Derrick Henry is going to work out in Baltimore. I mean, for a guy that takes as many hits as he does, and a cursed organization that can't keep a running back healthy like Baltimore, I don't want to jinx anything. I hope he's excellent there. I hope he's very successful, but you don't know what's going to happen. So it didn't make any sense to me that they seemingly were not involved in anything. At least you could say, all right, the Cowboys made a push for something.
Yeah.
There's no reports that they've even made pushes for certain players.
Yeah. Like we tend to hear, well, so-and-so, maybe they were, and I know maybe the trades that have happened so far this offseason didn't necessarily mean the Cowboys were going to get involved depending on the player. Fully understand that. But there's at least the idea of player shortlist they wanted to go here, or Dallas had heavy interest in this guy and they lost out. Like you said, we're not hearing any of that. And at the end of the day, could this be the right choice? Yes. But it's also very much fair to question, like, now you're really going to rely on A, the draft, B, your UDFAs, C, whoever's left over in free agency of the vets right now. Because again, there's probably in the next week or two, we'll go over some names that are available, and your own players. You're relying on a lot of things because, and I'll close this up on what I think will be, as of now, what my X factor for Dallas would be going into this next season. You kind of touched upon it as you were running down the roster earlier, Justin. Offensive line for Dallas. This is not that same offensive line that just tore up the league in the younger years of Zeke and Dak. Like Tyrone Smith, gone. I know he's been gone for a couple of years, but Travis Frederick, gone. Zach Martin's still there. And the kid they drafted a couple of years ago in the first round, I think Taylor Smith, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember offhand the names.
I think he had a pretty good rookie year. I think he had to fill in for Tyrone Smith his rookie season at left tackle briefly before Smith came back into the fold because he was hurt. Like, I've heard good things so far. Not going to say it's perfection because I think he had a holding issue coming in. I think he may have had some of those issues in his first year. I think he may have cleaned it up in year two. But right now, if you're Dallas, your offensive line is going to be the key to the running game, no matter if you do end up bringing a new running back here, or like you said, keeping Dak upright. What is the biggest detriment to a quarterback being able to get production in this league? Being flat on their back. And if you're Dallas, you got to hope that you can keep that offensive line together here. And maybe, you mentioned this defense earlier. Dan Quinn, Justin, how much are they going to lose? A lot? I mean, now, I think who they hire defensively? They hired the former Vikings head coach, if I'm not mistaken, to be the new DC, right? They is that who Dallas brought into the fold?
I don't know. Let me look.
Yeah. So, but you're missing out on Dan Quinn. Like, will this defense be able to go lock into their new role with a new DC? Like, how instrumental was Dan Quinn potentially? Because we know Jerry Jones has wanted to keep him. Like, this is the third straight year in a row where we were hearing teams, or at least I'll say second straight year in a row, we heard teams were willing to interview with Dan Quinn and he was going to get a second shot as a head coach. They definitely, like, Jerry Jones wanted to keep him here. Dan Quinn was a very highly paid assistant coach. Now he's Mike Zimmer. That's what I was thinking of. Like, Mike Zimmer is good defensively. I don't doubt that his scheme can definitely work. How quickly will the players be able to adapt to it? Will it be I think there's plenty of questions, fair questions to ask for Dallas. And I will say this because you mentioned Dak earlier. If Dallas struggles to start the season, Dak's not going to be at the top of that issue board for me. He's just not, unless he plays extremely poorly. That's a different combo. But as of now, if we have to enter the reality of Dallas is going to struggle to start out in 2024, Dak's not the reason. There is a number of other things that the Cowboys have to deal with going into this upcoming season. Dak is nowhere near on top of the list. If anything, Dak's probably going to hide a lot of these issues to start 2024. So we'll see there. So, Justin, we went through a big Dallas conversation there. We went through a lot of AFC talk. I think for the most part, again, and going from previous weeks, we talked about a lot of these teams. But I think for the most part, we've kind of hit on nearly everything, man. I don't know if there's one last, Justin, is there one last team, one last signing that you think maybe we haven't paid a lot of attention to so far that you think you just want to give a brief spotlight here before we move on?
can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think we've pretty much covered it.
Mhm. I mean, I will
We can talk
say
about the Sonoronic trade again if you want. I could talk about that for days.
we could, yeah, we could. I mean, I would be against. I will say just one quick thing because I mentioned. I think I did mention the signing earlier here, and I think we did talk about it before. But I will say this, Justin: the Los Angeles Rams, I think, are the team for me that is going to be very interesting to see how the next month or so goes for them, especially with the draft. Because I saw it today. I don't know if I sent it to you. I don't know if this is a future trivia for Rick here. So if it was, I apologize. But the Rams are picking in the first round in this draft for the first time since 2016.
Yep.
That is wild. They're going to add talent there. And again, I wish there was a difference between what they call comeback player of the year, and I wish they would make another award because please, for the love of God, Tre'Davious White, I think if he could stay healthy, it's a big if, what the last couple of years in Buffalo were for him. But if Tre'Davious White could really break through and be that guy for the Rams secondary this year, kind of what they need as a new bona fide definitive number one corner, this could be a team that has some potential here. Now, I know it's going to be tough because they did lose Aaron Donald, right? You got a lot to make up for there. Production aside, the presence, his pure dominance, a guy who takes he would get double teamed by offensive linemen, freaking triple team, right? Like it's going to be difficult to replace what Aaron Donald provided you. So maybe it wouldn't surprise me if some people are going to take a step back of being high on the Rams. I think even Rick maybe spoke about it last week because I believe he picked for the Rams and he talked about the idea that it's an older quarterback in Matthew Stafford. It's losing Aaron Donald. There's a lot of reasons to be kind of, iffy on the Rams going into this next season. But I think there's still stuff there and still Sean McVay at the helm that if they have a solid draft here, I think the Rams are threatening for the wild card once again, definitive wild card. And they were 2 games away from San Fran last year. I don't know if they'll do enough to close that gap. But last year, I don't think any of us had the Rams making the postseason. This year, as of now, again, this could change in a couple months' time, but the Rams are going to be a team that wild card conversation easily going into the 2024 going into the discourse for the 2024 campaign as we get closer to training camp, as we get closer to the preseason and stuff like that. Because there's a lot there to like. I think there's still stuff that you can really just look at and be like, this is a good team. This is a really good team for the Rams going into this next season. So that's my very brief thing. Do you want to expand more about the Son Reddick deal? I'm not against it. Just anything that you feel we didn't talk about enough when we talked about it last week?
No, I don't have anything like legit to add. I was just gonna be like, hey,
Still plenty of excitement, and like we discussed last week, you didn't have to give up a lot for the guy, and it's a win-win. Either you extend him, you end up paying a little bit extra in terms of the draft pick because of the condition, but he's great for you, or he just has the one great year, he leaves, but you guys are just gangbusters this season, right? Like it can only be a win-win for the Jets.
Well, they get a compensation pick if he leaves.
That too. Then what? Like the max with the conditions that could become a second-round pick, right?
The max pick is a second-round pick.
Is like, so in theory,
he's got to play over 65% of the snaps and get over 10 or more sacks.
Right. So you could potentially give up a second-round pick, and if he leaves, you'll get a third-round pick next year. Or you give up a second-round pick and you sign this guy for a couple of years. Like, again, there's so much to like about that trade. The Jets really did great there. It's going to be very interesting to see what we're expecting of them in this upcoming draft here. Still over a month away. It's kind of crazy.
The draft?
Yeah, right?
It's in 2 weeks.
What?
Yeah.
What am I missing? I thought this was May.
A month, apparently.
Okay, I put a month in my brain there that just didn't exist. So the draft is
actually less than 2 weeks. The draft is the 25th.
Really? 11 days. Look at that.
25th of April.
Time flies when you have no idea what's happening around you. So that being said, I think all the discussion is there to be had with everything. The draft here in apparently less than 2 weeks' time now. So we'll have plenty to talk about. I think we could do something fun, I think, potentially for this next episode. We'll talk about that. But as everything concludes, I think that just about does it for the football talk here, Justin. I think we've done a pretty good job. Again, there's still some more to talk about. I think we'll get into maybe this is a post-draft show to have, but maybe the veterans that are still out there, right? There's OBJ, like he's still going to be out there. There's this, I forget his name. There's this quarterback out there who's like decent. Who's a starter recently in a division. Didn't really accomplish anything, but people think he's really good. I don't know. Someone apparently needs to buy his jersey because they lost like a bet this season. I don't know, something like that. But there's still plenty of names to talk about that are available out there. At least a handful, and we'll give those names credit probably post draft because I think there's some draft related conversations we can have here going into this weekend. Will literally be the last show before it, so there's that to be had. All right, Justin, that ends the football talk. Let's talk about a little bit more aside from that, because if you have been watching the show for any significant amount of time, first off, thank you. And second off, you know that in previous episodes, when Justin has missed and when it's been myself and the Podfather on, we tend to get a little bit chaotic with the conversation. Now, we're not going to have any last second trivia here. Don't worry. We don't have that. And sadly for me, this is not F1 related either, although Chinese Grand Prix this upcoming weekend. First sprint race of the season. Go McLaren. But what we do have is some just fun overall talk that we're going to get to have, because Justin and I haven't really gotten a chance to do this on the show ever, even on the very first pilot episode that's kind of lost to time. Not really, it's still out there, but the pilot episode that didn't have the Podfather here, we mainly talk football. We haven't gotten to talk a lot outside of football, Justin, so that's what we're going to do here for a bit. We could go 10 minutes, we could go 20. We don't know how long we're going to go here with this discussion.
I know this is all new to me, so I'm letting you take the lead here, Jurg.
Well, you're going to start off the conversation here because I want to know.
I
Because,
am.
like you said, you went to the Knicks game today.
I
Big
did.
game for the Knicks. I'm not asking for a blow-by-blow of the game and what you thought of the team, etc. I mean, you could give that if you want. But talk about being in MSG. When was the last time you were in MSG for a game?
For a game?
Anything. Even the last time you were at MSG.
Well, it was definitely last year. I didn't go to another game this year. I was at 2 games last year. I don't remember which one was which, but I do know I happened to have like backhandedly lucked into getting a suite.
Really?
I was in a suite
Wow.
for the Knicks 30-point comeback against the Celtics at the Garden last year.
Ooh.
Yeah, in the fourth quarter. That was an all-time game. This is second. I've been to a few Knicks games. This was a great game. They weren't down 30, but it was a comeback win. They played a tough Chicago team. Chicago really gave him, a hard time. The defense was shaky at times, but they came back. Brunson put up 40. They came out in overtime, and they clinched their first 50-win season in, I believe, exactly 10 years. I think it was the 2013-14 season with Carmelo Anthony and the New York Knicks. The last time they were the number 2 seed as well. And they clinched the number 2 seed again. And it's an exciting time in New York. It sucks that Julius is hurt because he's a guy that, through his ups and downs, he's really helped us get here. And he's been here since the beginning of the rebuild. So it would have been awesome to have him on the court. But I still think this team can be messed with. I do really believe that they are the second best team in the East. And let's see. I mean, that Celtics team, they choke.
Yeah. They've had a couple choke jobs this season. They lost a couple big leads in back-to-back games to the Atlanta Hawks. Not necessarily a team that's that impressive to be doing that again.
A history of choking. They were supposed to be great last year, and they choked.
Yep.
So like,
and they seem beatable on their home court. And I gotta say, like the big thing I want, Justin, is like how rocking was the Garden? Like I saw clips, of course, on IG and Twitter, but how rocking was the Garden for this game?
There were times like in the middle of the game that I was worried because the Bulls went on like that run in the third quarter, and the Garden was quiet. And it was a weird time because it's the last game of the year. It's Fan Appreciation Day. They were giving out stuff and doing so. Like it was a Sunday early game, so like a lot of kids there, like young families and stuff. The end of the game, when the Knicks stormed back in the fourth quarter, I think their largest lead for the Bulls was 9.
Right.
So not like hugely insurmountable, but when they started hitting shots, and before Brunson came back on the court, and Bogdanovich was hitting shots, and McBride hit a few shots, and DiVincenzo was coming up big, it came alive, and it was. I've been at the Garden. I want to say over 100 times now, and
wow,
top 5, one of the loudest. Well, 50 Fish shows will do that to you.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I one of the top 5 loudest I've ever heard, Madison Square Garden.
Wow,
Yeah.
I think I've only been to one Knicks game.
Well, you're not
I
a Knicks
guess.
fan.
True, and also funny enough, to be fair, the one Knicks game I went to was Dwayne Wade's last game in MSG.
That's cool.
That I remember. I would because I that was the year before you interned at our school, so I was interning that, and I remember that day I had a game, and I told Rick that day. I wish he was here because I'd be able to like, recount this like properly. But like I remember, I told him it's like, hey, can I like what the second the game is done, can I like just book it? He's like, why? It's like going to the Knicks game tonight, Dwayne Wade's last career game. He's like, yeah, sure. He probably said something way more funnier or snarky, but that's why I wish he was
Way
here.
snarkier, yeah.
100%. But I did. I got to go to Dwayne Wade's last career game there, and I also got to go just his last career game overall because it was in Barclays. Me and my friend who's a Nets fan. He's a Nets and a Celtics fan. And I know. I don't get it, but we got to go. We secured those.
Worst person. That's my two least favorite teams in the NBA.
We got to go to Dwayne Wade's last career game there, and it was just absolutely phenomenal there. So I remember that. But no, it's the Knicks, man. Like what a season it's been. Like again, I'm not a Knicks fan, so I tend to find humor in it whenever New York teams lose in general. Like I get a smile.
We had beef last year.
I get a smile on my face when the Mets are struggling. I get a smile on my face when the Islanders or the Rangers drop one.
I like when the baseball teams struggle in New York. I'm not a huge baseball guy, but I love going to baseball games. So when they lose, it's so much cheaper. And don't worry, anyone that's watching with New York, I have a great record going to live games. It's like the only thing that I'm ever lucky in. I think I've seen like one loss in like all of the live games that I've been to in the last like 5 years. Like they always win. I went to a Mets game and a Yankees game back to back. It was DeGrom's return and 5 perfect innings against the Braves. And then the next game was Aaron Judge hit 2 home runs and Garrett Cole went perfect for 7, I think it was. So I saw 13 perfect innings and like 6 home runs in like a week.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was crazy. Or a month or whatever it was. But like it was, I have a good record. So like it's okay that they cheap out because when I go, they win. You should want me to make more money so that I can go to more games.
I was gonna say I think my Yankees attendance record I have the exact number. I'm approaching 10. I think I'm maybe like 7 or 8. I think I've only seen the Yankees lose in person like once or twice. Like they have a pretty good, and actually like last season the Yankees game I went to, it was the I think it was the Rizzo bobblehead night, and that was the day where he hit 2 home runs, one of them being the game winner. So that was something. And I remember this is way back, Aaron Judge's rookie season. I think it was the first home series of the year. Me and my sister went to I think the first game of it, and he popped off 2 home runs. That was his rookie season before he went off. Little did I know in that game, I just watched the future AL MVP and AL home run record setter. Like some of his first home runs, I got to be there for it, so it was pretty cool. On the other hand, they're 0 for 3 when I go.
Oh gosh,
and
that's not good.
And so Mets fans, you definitely don't want me to go to your games. And I remember all 3 particularly. So the first one I went to, I was in 5th grade. It was like a class trip. I got to go on it. I don't even know if it was a class trip. I think like the top 20 kids grade wise, it was something along those lines. Like got to go, and they faced the Nationals. And it was a terrible game. Like the Nationals won 1-0, and they didn't score until like one of the final innings. And as a kid, I was more of like a basketball fan. So it's like for me going to the baseball game, it's fine, but it's like it wasn't anything crazy. The highlight of that game for me, I actually remember this. Someone in the crowd accidentally chanted "Let's go Yankees." I think they meant to say Mets, but they accidentally chanted "Let's go Yankees." So I remember that. It was just comedy because I remember my teacher.
New York fans, they were for sure trying to troll someone. That was not an accident.
True. I think my teacher or someone near like my teacher like pointed that out. So it was absolutely hilarious for that. The second one I went to, it was a Dodgers Mets game. Cody Bellinger hit a grand slam that game. This was when he was on the Dodgers. He hit a grand slam. It was either the season he won MVP or the season before he won MVP. It was one of those 2 years. So Bellinger popped off. And then last season, I went to a game with a couple friends of mine, and it was against the Rangers. And I don't know if you remember this game. So like the Mets were leading for a good chunk of it. The Rangers didn't take the lead until like the dying innings, or I think it maybe went to extras, and the Rangers took the lead in extras and won. It was crazy. The funniest thing too was that one of my friends, he was total legally, hypothetically gambling there, and he had both the Mets winning and the under. Well, the Mets lost and the over hit. So that was brutal. I felt bad for
Nothing
him.
good happened for him.
Oh, absolutely not. I felt bad for him. I think he told me. Made the joke, or he told me, it's like I probably shouldn't go with you next time you go to a Mets game that you're betting on.
I'm thinking about it now, and there's only one New York team that I've never seen in a live game, at least a home game. The Giants.
Really?
Never been to a Giants game.
Well, I've never been to a football game actually.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been to, I've seen a hockey game in a football arena before I've seen a football game. So, which for me is standard protocol. I'm a hockey fan.
It's great going to a football game. I would much rather watch it on TV.
Right.
That's just me. You could see it so much better. There's so much more that you can take in, and I'll tailgate in my backyard. I don't care about that. To me, that's the best part of the football game.
Right.
I would go see any other live sport over a football game, and football is by far my favorite sport. If you couldn't tell, I know more about football than I know about any other sport. It's not even close. I follow the other sports way less. I mean, you're a much bigger basketball fan than I am. I live and die with the Knicks, but I literally die when the Knicks are bad. So like I just don't watch, like basketball falls off for me. So football, I'll watch any team play. It's a different story for me. So, but again, if I had a choice between watching that team live and watching that team from home as a pro game, I'm probably going home. If you want to talk about college, maybe I'll go to a college game. I'd rather go to a college game.
Right, because I feel like that arena would be, if you go to the right school, it'll be crazy.
Yeah, to me, that's more like, it's more of a like experience thing. Like it's fun, it's rowdy, but like I don't have the same feeling about college football that I do about pro football. College football is great. Don't get me wrong. I'll watch college football all day, but I would rather go to a college football game than watch it on TV. I'd rather watch an NFL game than go.
100%. I don't blame you. My best friend back home, like he's gone to a couple NFL games with his girlfriend now. I think 3 or 4, and his thoughts are the same. It's like the first time it was cool, but eventually it's just like, kind of would rather. And he's gone to all the Big Four at this point. Like I think over the last 2 years, like he's made a big, like he's wanted to go to like more games. He's gone to a couple hockey games even. I think like Islanders and Devils games.
We had a hockey game this week.
There we go. So there's that. I think, have I seen? I'm trying. So now taking my Rolodex from New York sports. So I haven't, obviously, because I haven't gone to a football game. I've not seen either the Jets nor the Giants play in person. I've seen the Rangers play in person on quite a number of occasions.
Been to one Rangers game, and that was a very long time ago. I almost don't really remember it. I just remember going.
You remember you were there. There we go.
Yeah.
I don't think, from memory, I don't think I've been to an Islanders game. I had wanted to earlier this month because the Islanders played the Blackhawks, but my schedule didn't allow it. I was upset. I was upset, bro, because it would have been my second chance to see, because I did see, me and my sister, we went to Pittsburgh for the home opener for Pittsburgh this season because it was Blackhawks game. So I got to see Bedard's first career game and first career point. So yeah,
that's great.
So I got to see that in what has been a phenomenal rookie season for my boy. Future of the franchise, cups will be won, please. But please. But I've been to a Knicks game. I've been to a couple Nets games, in part because my friend who is a Nets fan. We've been to 2 Heat Nets games. We went to a Nets Bucks game, and we went to a Nets Suns game. So I think me and him have gone. Yeah, we've gone to like 4 Nets games. And I've been to a couple Yankees games, a couple Mets games. So fun little thing here. For MSG, actually, I remember this was my high school years. I actually went to a Syracuse versus St. John's matchup in the Garden in one of my years in high school. It was my junior or senior year that me and my dad went, actually. And I don't think this will surprise you, Justin. Syracuse swamped St. John's. They beat them by like 25 at least.
What?
Yeah, it was not pretty for the Johnnies. It was just not pretty at all. So there was that. So Hey, we brought football back into it to an extent, ladies and gentlemen. So we were able to circle back a little. Probably on the next topic here we might discuss is going to be a little bit less football here, but that was good. So we got Justin's Knicks report. Maybe that'll be a thing we do in the postseason, depending on how the Knicks do. Because hey, man, it wouldn't surprise me. Like it's gonna depend here. And honestly, with the Knicks being the second seed, it might be Knicks Heat in the first round.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see who wins that play-in game. And then, listen, as much as I'm happy that they won the second seed, like the first round's not going to be an easy because
Right.
they got the Sixers with Embiid back or playoff Heat, which playoff Heat is just a nasty team. Like I don't care what you say, they could be the 7th seed every year or the 8th seed every year. I don't want to play the Heat in the playoffs. I never want to play the Heat in the playoffs.
Right.
Not with Jimmy Butler there.
Right.
We'll see what they are without Jimmy Butler at some point, but
not good. I'll tell you that right now. Not good.
I don't want to play the Heat in the playoffs.
Right. So it'll be fun. Although I will say I don't think you guys have to worry because it would not surprise me at all. I think there's a chance Philly might win that game only because I think the Heat might take their foot off the gas slightly and be the 8th seed again, which I would love to torture the Celtics.
You think that the Heat have the potential to do what they did last year?
Look, I'm a fan, so I'm not going to say no necessarily, but I think it's going to be exponentially tougher. The only thing that gives me some hope is the fact that it's going to be like Jimmy is better earlier in the postseason. Sans the bubble, he's better.
Hurt.
Yeah,
he's an older player now.
Yeah, and right now, it kind of depends. Like I literally think the first 2 games of the postseason, and it's both. You could consider it the play-in and also the first 2 games of the first round. It's going to depend what kind of Jimmy we see. Because I was not expecting 56 points he put up against the Bucks in the first round last year. Wasn't expecting that at all.
Well, I mean, he absolutely went off, and they were helped by Giannis going down. But let's face it, they
weren't losing that series.
I expected them to win the whole thing. So
it's going to be something to see. Like, yeah, if Jimmy can come back, and if some of the pieces that have been stepping up here and there, if they could, like, I want more Bam consistency. It's like that's the number one thing for me. I need more. Like when Bam is playing aggressive and he's getting a couple assists a game, we're a better team. Yeah. When he's playing so passive, it angers me because he has the talent to be so much more. Like there will literally be times where I'm just like you're not bigger than everyone, but I feel like you're so skilled as a player, you can get to where you want to get to on the floor. Like I think Bam can get to where he wants to. It's just the decision making. It needs to take that next level from there. So we'll see ultimately what happens. I will say it's funny because I think my friend was telling me it's like, don't you not want to see the Celtics or the Knicks? Well, it was the Bucks before today. Now it's the Knicks. He was like, don't you not want to see them? I'm like, why would I not want to see them? It's not even just confidence of beating them from previous postseasons. It's the fact that like at the earlier in the playoffs it is, the healthier Jimmy seems. So you're telling me Jimmy has a shot at putting up 2 40-point games in a series in the first round? I'm very concerned if I'm the Knicks or the Celtics there. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to do it.
Well, but the defense that I saw today, I mean, there was holes. OG didn't look great today. A couple big plays, but there were issues. Defensively, when they needed stops, it rarely happened. It happened. Unfortunately for them, it happened enough that they were able to pull it out in overtime. But, like, I think Vujovic, White, and DeRozan.
Yeah, they're not good defensively.
They all scored 20 points.
Yeah.
And Caruso, I think, had like 15.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just they were lucky they were able to take over with enough time left, and then they kind of really were in charge. Although they almost gave it away in overtime too. But talk about that. We can stay positive here.
Right.
But defensively, for a team that made its bones defensively this year, they have to get that back.
Right, for sure. All right, we move on from basketball and maybe sports talk, depending on the conversation.
What is our next topic, sir?
I'll give you the choice here, Justin. Do you want to sort of stick in the sports world but make it a little bit of entertainment wise, or do you want to go to strict entertainment and a certain show that you and I have both seen over the last month or so?
Oh, I don't know what either one of these are.
Take your pick.
I don't know. I've had a very, very sports-packed weekend. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
So do I stay with the theme or do I change it up? Why don't we change it up?
Okay. Going straight to it. All right. So Ladies and gentlemen, for full disclosure, Justin and I were both born in the mid to late 90s. What an amazing time the 90s were, even though I was only alive for the last 3 years of it.
I was
The
born in the
early,
early 90s. You forget I'm old.
yeah,
Yeah.
I honestly do. I keep thinking you're only like a year older than me, honestly.
No, I went back to college. So I was out of college for like 5 years, and then I came back and did my internship and graduated. And that's how we all met.
Justin was a party animal, man. He was a party animal.
I
I can't wait. We've made jokes about the tell-all episode, like we did that last year. Maybe we'll do one this year. I want to hear both you and Rick any stories you guys had from your college days, because I think that's more entertaining. My college days were boring as hell.
Buffalo days were great. I know exactly how much fun costs because I didn't go to class. Yeah.
That's amazing. That is
Buffalo is a great school. It is. I highly advise, if you want to make something yourself, you can go to Buffalo.
Right.
But you could also go to Buffalo and not go to class. It's expensive, but it was fun.
We need to put that on a t-shirt. I know exactly how expensive it is to have go to class. That's
I do. I paid it off in student loans for years.
Write that down. Oh Lord. Whew. Okay, that's a good one. So Justin and I, born in the 90s, early mid 2000s was amazing. It was kind of like the last of the 90s, that feeling before the color got sapped out the world. Another conversation we could have one time, because these nostalgic reels, Justin, just smacked me in the face.
What kind of nerdy stuff are you going to pull out of my past right now?
Or
maybe my present.
So there's a cartoon that the both of us for sure, and probably a lot of people within our age range watched growing up, that we all loved because it was fun.
This is not narrowing it down.
There was great storytelling. It told a lot of adult themes in it, but kept it to a kid's show and didn't force it. They were very well constructed with it. Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh.
We enjoyed Avatar growing up. I'm probably going to rewatch that series later this year, for all I know. I probably will. So, with me saying all that, over the last, and this is where we get to the more pop culture, social culture type of the episode. Okay, this is what the people, I say the people, I mean Rick, has been waiting for the two of us. I mean, he's been waiting for us to talk about a bunch of other stuff, but we're going to start with this. Well, this might be the main thing for us to end the episode on. Netflix came out with their own live adaptation of Avatar, because apparently there was a movie made in the late 2000s, early 2010s that had M. Night Shyamalan's name on it. Now, we're not going to speak of that. That doesn't exist. There is no war in Ba Sing Se, and there was no movie by M. Night Shyamalan. But there are some really funny reviews of it on YouTube if you want to listen to those from content creators. Just amazing. But Netflix decided to take their hand with it. And they tried. I'll say that. In certain ways it was good, and in certain ways it was not.
See, this is the problem that I have, because their argument is certain things don't translate to live action. But the changes that they made in these series, because there's a lot more than just Avatar: The Last Airbender that they made into live actions recently. The changes that they made were clearly just stylistic changes, but they were more than that. They were major plot changes that didn't need to be made. Like, and you're sitting here and being like, we're gonna take, that thing that you were like super nostalgic about and like you loved as a kid and like everything about it was perfect the way it is. We're gonna change it for you. We're gonna make it better. And the answer is no, you're not going to make it better. You're going to ruin it for certain people. And for as amazing as it looked, for as amazing that the casting was, because I really do believe that the casting was fantastic. All the actors did a great job. The story changes were an absolute killer.
Yep.
That's where it gets right. I mean, to ruin a character like Boomy, this kills me.
It hurt. I put it on my IG story.
It hurts. It hurts my soul.
Like, look how they massacred my boy. It hurt. So
because the casting was great. That actor was fantastic. He looked like him. He sounded like him. He acted like him. But then also they just completely changed the entire theme and meaning and importance of the character for no reason. They went through the same story, Jurg.
So this is the thing. When I've had these conversations with other people, I have kept it consistent. I think I have two different scores for the Netflix Avatar adaptation. I think, like you said, from a look perspective, I think this was critical for them to nail down the look of it, especially after what happened well over a decade ago with the last time they tried to make Avatar live action. I think the look, the bending, like I was when they released the trailers of it, I'm like, okay, it looks good, in these little spurts. Let's see how it looks through the show. Look great, consistently really good. Maybe like one or two things you could kind of point out as like a little bit of a not weakness, but like it was tough for them maybe to figure out how to make it look in moments, but consistency, like the bending was phenomenal. Like you said, I think the acting choices were for the most part spot on. I think there's maybe only one or two I would disagree with, but it's not because the actor or actress did poorly. It's because thinking to what the character is like, does this person have a chance to give off the same aura for that character is more the thing for me. But I think the actor and actresses' choices, I think you could tell there was a lot of commitment by these actors and actresses to understand the characters they were playing and to try to give this off. From what it felt to me, I think majority of these kids, if they didn't watch it, like the full thing, they tried to get as much as they could from the animated characters to understand how to properly show them. So I want to give a lot of props to that because I think a big thing with acting now is like understanding the role you're playing and taking it seriously. And in a case like this where there's something that you can go off of to try to get somewhat of a semblance down, I think the actors did a lot to do right by the characters in their best ability, right? Like I think there was a lot done, and I appreciate that because you can tell good and bad acting, right? Like you don't need to have gone into Hollywood. You don't need to be an amazing filmmaker. You don't need to be a movie podcast, right? This ain't a movie podcast, but if you want an amazing movie podcast, our 2 cents podcast. But you don't need to be a movie podcast to know what good or bad acting looks like, right? Like you can kind of figure it out. I think there was great acting throughout this, right? So the casting, the acting, the effects, the look. Again, some weaknesses here and there, but it was still pretty good. And there was one other thing. Oh, the chemistry. I think you mentioned it just. The chemistry between these actors and actors, I think was really, really good. All of that specifically, like a 7.5, 8 out of 10 to me. Like that, all of that was great.
Yeah.
The storytelling and the writing, good God, where do we begin? That gets like a 2.5 from me. Maybe a 3 if I'm being nice.
Because it's so frustrating because you could tell
Yep.
that the bones were there. If they would have stuck to the story more appropriate, like more accurately, like I understand they wanted to take out certain things. They wanted to take out some of the sexism from Sokka and like those jokes and things like that. I get that. It doesn't translate. You want to take out some of like the slapstick cartoony stuff. It doesn't translate. You're right. Why are you changing major plot points
And
in the
characters
story?
and how they acted.
There was plenty of fluff and fluff and extra in that first season where they didn't need to make such stylistic and damning changes.
Yep.
And look, even some of the changes, they weren't so bad. Like I didn't really hate the Mechanist being in Ba Sing Se and like
Right.
like the interaction with Jet and all of them. Why make the change with Boomy?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Why make the changes with Azula? Doesn't make any sense to me. That's a major character who has major plot points. Why make the changes in the Southern Water Tribe and the Northern Water Tribe?
Yep.
It just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you're not familiar with the show, it's probably foreign to you right now. So our biggest gripe with the show, in the simplest of terms possible, without me going too in deep with some of my issues, which I will here in a moment, but I'll just keep it general for some people in case you've never watched the original. Which, if you haven't, please do go watch it. It's absolutely fantastic work of art. Like you said, it's just they and again, this is strictly the way they wrote these characters. This is not me going after the actors or the actresses. You can only act based on what you're given. They didn't have a choice in this. They have to act it. And I think they did really well. But like you said, I think they were creative. And I think, like you said, there's a reasonable way to say you can meld stories together. I think part of the problem with melding the stories together was the fact that it sometimes felt like it was too jump cutty away to where you were starting to get some momentum with one of those subplots, but they went away to the next subplot and let that build. And then they went away to the next one and you let that. It felt like in certain instances there was they had an idea of what they wanted to do. They just didn't necessarily hit on it perfectly. The idea of how to put them together in one place worked. Like just the general, like the Mechanist, Jet, like a band of rebels, a guy who's trying to make a life for him and his son, putting it in the big city that is the second largest city in the Earth Kingdom. I think that concept was good. I think some of the execution of the storytelling that they sided with was a little bit eh. I still think they did a really good job with the Iroh part where they had him be taken by the soldiers and they had Zuko eventually go after him. They did good there. They had a good character moment with one of the soldiers talking about how his older brother was there when Iroh invaded the biggest city there in the kingdom. So like there are little things that they did well, but then there was just so much stuff that was just completely sacrificed. And just they took bits that they wanted, but it doesn't hit the same. And I'll get to my overall thought on it in a moment. Aside from my rating, I have a big overall thought about how I feel about Netflix doing this. But just like keeping with the show itself, I felt that they wanted to give off certain things about certain characters and they only took certain portions of it. Like I've listened to at least half a dozen reviews of Avatar of the Netflix Avatar adaptation online, and consistently everyone, along with Boomy and how they felt about what they did to him, Katara, they do not like the way that the writing has Katara in for a number of reasons. But it kind of just feels like she's there for some plot exposition in certain instances, and that's it. And like with the main character Aang, like his story to me, I didn't like the fact that they made it from this kid who's not ready to take on this responsibility, and that's why he ran away, to I'm just going out for a walk, a fly on my sky bison, and the storm caught me. Because part of the reason why in the original cartoon, which again, a little bit spoiler in case you've somehow not watched the cartoon / original animation, like part of the thing that this is big in season 1 and even in the other 2 seasons, just maybe, I don't know if less points is the right word. Like Aang has to deal with the grief of the fact that he ran away from his people. And he, as a child and as someone with his powers, thinks that he could have done something to protect those that he cared about.
But I think they leaned into that aspect too much. I mean, that's how they ruined Boomy.
Yeah, no, I'm saying is that they changed a bit too much, and then when they tried to do their own take on it, it just didn't hit the same.
It's not even that it didn't hit the same; it was just fundamentally wrong. Like they missed the points of certain characters. Boomy was a character that, brought, some relief to Aang.
Yep.
He was someone that came in and said, this is a friendship that spanned 100 years. We are still friends. We will always be friends. I'm here for you. I will help you. I can't necessarily help you as being your earthbending teacher, but like I will always be your friend and be there to help you. And you didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
It's not your fault. Instead, Boomy immediately is like, dude, what's your problem? Like, you ruined the world. And like, it is the exact opposite of what the character was intended to be.
Yep.
Like there were some issues. I mean, I really did like the story and the acting between Iroh and Zuko, but like they made Iroh a little less wise, and a little more, like cutthroat, and they made Zuko a little less cutthroat and a little more wise.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever remember a part in the first season where Zuko's teaching Iroh lessons
at all.
Yeah, but it happened more than once.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just different, man.
No,
it was too different.
Yeah, and here's the thing, because like one argument that I heard from my friends when like I've had this discussion with them, it's like, well, like whoever would take it, whether it was going to be Netflix or someone else, they were going to put their own spin on it. That's fine. There were a couple instances here where they did their own little spin, and I think it worked. But to fundamentally change, and this isn't even about Netflix and Avatar, like Netflix's Avatar thing. Like you said, this is about a bunch of the live action stuff they're doing, and a lot of this new like refreshing of a lot of these old IPs and projects and stuff, you're taking out the struggle of the characters. You're taking out the fact that in
changing
canon,
core themes. If you're
yeah,
gonna come out with a remake of a show, the very least that you can do is keep the core themes, the characters' struggle and growth, and the beginning and end. And if you want to change some stuff in the middle because it doesn't necessarily translate, you have to keep the characters the same. When they did Cowboy Bebop, I was horrified with the changes they made. It wasn't the same show. Like, at least Avatar, you could understand. All right, it was Avatar. Cowboy Bebop, they like had some characters that looked the same, and then the show, everything was different. Like the first episode, I think, was the closest, and it was vastly different than anything they ever did on the actual anime. Like, it was just so, and it wasn't good. And that's the thing. That's another one. The casting was great. The special effects, the imagery, like it looked like Cowboy Bebop. Why make such vast changes? I don't know. They took out one of the four main characters. They just were like, yeah, this person doesn't exist anymore. And then they added someone else who was just like a shitty character.
It's like kind of like what I was saying. It's like you change the core values of what it was about, and for me, and I'm speaking specifically about Avatar because like this is the one I watched the most in depth. Like I watched all 8 episodes in a couple sittings. So like I did not want to speed run this and miss anything. I watched I did 3-3-2 with my episode consumption because I wanted to let this all sink in and be like, what did they do? Like, what's different that you kind of have to accept how they did it, and what else there's like. Again, what I was thinking about the characters with Sokka, there's certain things that you had to make different about him, right? I get, like you said, certain things that they had back then that apparently like just can't fly in the world. But you still could have made Sokka a bit imperfect. I say imperfect, like not perfect. Like in case my wording starts to flip here. It's late. I'm tired. But I like one thing you could have done in that first scene where, well, not first scene, but when he like has his little confrontation with Zuko, right? In episode 1 of the Netflix adaptation versus how it is in the show. Sokka is very highly believing in himself. He's the oldest remaining male where his people are because all the grown-ups had to go off on a war. But he's not truly combat experienced. In the animated show, you see that Zuko whoops him, beats him very easily. In the Netflix adaptation, Sokka, to an extent, holds his own, but he's not sloppy. He doesn't look like someone who's inexperienced. And he looks like he had at least some kind of formal training. That's not the case. Like you're changing, like that's what I was saying before you talked about the core values. It's like you're making characters who have imperfections, you're making them seem as close to perfect as possible when you show them. And that bothers me. And like I said, this is going to tie into what my overall thoughts about the Netflix adaptation is at the end of the day. But I don't like the portrayal of characters as perfect from day one. They're not. These are, what's Sokka in, like, chronologically, what is he at the start of the show? 16? What 16-year-old is going to look like he has formal training despite the fact he never received it? He's not Zuko, who he had teachers and his very war-famous uncle teaching him for 3 years out at sea. That's different. Zuko had people teaching him. He should at least be pretty.
In the anime, he was very formally trained in the beginning. I mean, since he was a kid.
No, but like I'm saying, that explains it. Like that's fine because there's consistency there. That's totally fine. With Sokka, what formal training would he have gotten? His family, his dad, and everyone had to leave when he was young, right? So it's those little things they do, or the fact that this one was like a 50-50 for me, but like the Fire Lord, the fact that I knew. And I entered the show before even watching the first episode. I knew the expectation was, okay, we're going to see Ozai early in this because these are real life people. You're not going to show them as a shadowy figure for an entire first season of the show. I knew we were going to see Ozai's face at some point in the first season. I accepted it. I was relatively cool with it. I felt like we saw him a little bit too much. And this is another thing that they do with a lot of these live action remakes now. I feel like they humanized him a little bit. In the Netflix adaptation, it's like they made Ozai feel some regret with sending Zuko out to catch the Avatar. That there was a little bit of regret with him burning his face. Where the villain in the show is a remorseless, cold-hearted piece of garbage. He burned his son's face and said, I don't want you back here until you capture the person that no one else has been able to capture for nearly a century. It's two totally different characters there from
Yeah, I
the
don't
original
necessarily
the
mind
adaptation.
so much the humanizing of him a little bit. Like, there's something super cartoony about someone so over the top evil that like it doesn't translate. So like if you
But
want to
I
like
don't but I don't
humanize him
think
like a little bit, but like he was clearly a sociopath in this. Like he knew what he was doing, and then also was like, "Yeah, I guess I got kind of soft. I only sent you out for an impossible task to find someone that no one has seen in 100 years. Like, and you're not allowed to come back until you find him, which gives you like that also evil amount of hope. And like, maybe I should have just killed you. Like there's he's pretty bad. Like, I don't have any issues with the way they portrayed Ozai, so to speak. I understand what you're saying, where they kind of humanized him a little bit more, but he was still like a sociopathic, like evil dude.
he's still sociopath. But I think, like, here's the thing: I don't think it's cartoony evil what he did. Like, you're talking about a parent who ruthlessly did something terrible to their child and left them with an emotional scar for years. That's real life. That's not cartoony. Like,
No, but it's the way that they go about it. Like, there's something in animated portrayals of evil that if they're super over the top evil and they come out in live action, it just doesn't feel the same. It feels fake. It feels jokey. It feels like, you know what I mean? Like he wouldn't have been portrayed as a serious character at that point. He would have been like a joke of an evil person. You know what I mean?
that's one of the ones. But again, he's nowhere near someone that they like. Did an amazing job with him. Again, my only real complaint is that I felt like there was maybe one or two less scenes we could have seen of him, like less
Yeah,
Ozai.
you don't see him in the first season. You don't see Azula in the first season.
And that's the thing. And man, I gotta tell you right now, another thing from all the reviews I've listened to, bro, people are not fans of how they're writing Azula. Again, not the actress, but how they're
No, it has
writing
nothing to do with the actress. It's
this
the
portrayal.
writing and the directing. They added her into parts where they didn't need her, and they compromised the actual character. The
Yep.
facts of this character are different. First of all, the coolest, most badass, wildest thing about Azula was the color of her flames.
Yep.
It always burned hotter. It was always blue.
Yep.
There was never a point where she didn't have blue flames. So why take that away? That is like a major plot point for her.
And even though we didn't know it when she first was shown in the show, once you see her do lightning for the first time,
Yeah, that also that they ruined that. Like
yeah,
that was not
100%.
like something that you just like get out of sheer force. She learned about that. Like
Yeah.
one person invented that and like figured it out, and that's Iroh, obviously. But it's not like an awakening. Like she didn't just be like, I'm stronger now.
Right.
Fucking like no. That was like a whole major plot point for like several seasons of her like attempting to learn and create and like accomplish lightning bending. And she does it. And
Because
it's like a
because
major
because
growth for her.
because Ozai could in the show. He did lightning bending in the show.
Yeah.
So it's like it's one of those things. It's clearly like a family thing. So it's one of those things that and the reason why we see it in the show that she does it is because she was upset with her dad. That's the stupidest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Like in the show,
Her presence in there doesn't make any sense. She
yeah,
just shouldn't have been in the first season.
and unless they do a complete 180 in the second season, which who knows when that's coming out. Oh, I don't know if there's an ETA of it. By the way, I actually don't. I haven't.
I know it was renewed. I don't know what the ETA is.
Right, like if I had to guess, because you can only realistically, like, these kids are gonna get older and look older here soon enough. Like, probably what, mid 2026 is maybe realistic for the second season.
Maybe even earlier. I could see 2025.
Right. No, I'm cool if it is next year. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
if you have
I
to
don't
give it
know.
a little bit of time.
I don't know.
And it also depends how many episodes. Again, are they going to do 8 every single time?
I think it's 8 every single time. But also, if you're adding things like that, why like you're doing it to fill time. So like why did you take out and change so much
yeah,
if you didn't need to and you could just fill time? Like, you didn't need to rush through the first season. I would have rather you split up the first season into 2 seasons, which would have made you more money because more people would be watching for longer. But I'd rather them have done that than change it and try and fit it all into one, but also take out like half the plot points so that you can add things that didn't make sense.
Right.
You want to make your own show, make your own show.
Yeah.
That's my argument also. Like, people are like, I needed to tell my story. Like, tell your goddamn story. Why you gotta steal someone else's story
Right.
to tell your own? You
Yeah.
want to you want to tell a story inside the world of Avatar? Go for it. That's awesome. I want to see it. You don't have to change my story that I love so much to
Yep.
also tell yours.
Yep.
You want to tell about a future Avatar, a past Avatar? There are so many avatars that we have never touched upon because
Yep.
they didn't put that in their original show, and they didn't put that in the original universe.
But
it
but
exists.
and it's per canon. Like, there's a bunch of them.
Tell your own story.
So and this is the crazy part, because at the end of the day, and it's not going to be all live action, but like apparently like Avatar Studios, like they have more projects in the works that they're going to do.
They have a movie that they're coming out about Aang, like
Yeah.
being an adult.
Yeah, which is going to be awesome. Like the gang as adults, because like part of it, I don't know how much of it will be based on, but like the fact that there are comics that like have chronological events that happen post Aang and them, but pre Korra. So it's like you have a base to work on. If you and you kind of went to Justice, so this is my last thing. Netflix, if you weren't going to go all in with this and making it as close, like I'm not going to say you got to make 26 episodes. I knew that was not going to be realistic, but 8, you give it a third of the episode amount, but a very similar run time. If you weren't going to go all in on just the concept of like even 12 episodes would have been like, I think they could have done a better
It's not
job.
about the episodes. It's that why you like if you have because it was 22-minute episodes of the
Of the
series. So,
cartoon,
like,
yeah.
in theory, they get the 3 episodes into one, and they could tell like the real lengthy parts and the main core stories. It wasn't about the number of episodes for me either. That was fine. They had the ability to tell the correct story in those things. They added a bunch of stuff that didn't need to be there, and then took out and changed and combined a bunch of stories that didn't make sense to combine. They combined every Spirit World episode into one.
So bad.
Didn't make sense, dude.
And the way that Aang beats the spirit is not by not showing any emotion, which is how he did it in the animated series. It's he gives him back a freaking statue that Roku had. And by the way, and I understand from the reviews, I understand they can't put a timeline on it because, again, this is one of those things that can't translate from animation to live action. In the show, there was a sense of urgency. We knew less than a year Sozin's comet was coming.
No, we don't find that out until really
until the very end.
Into the.
But remember, but in the animated show, we learned about Sozin's comet from Roku, and he told them you have less than a year to figure this out before the boy even started bending water properly.
It was before the end of the first season, but it was towards the end.
Oh, this was way before in the animated show. In the in the live action,
maybe I don't remember as much.
We'll rewatch in the summer, buddy. But in the Netflix adaptation, I don't think Roku mentioned the comet at all. And if he did, he didn't mention.
They talk about the comet coming back, but I don't think Aang is present.
No, so what it is that in the Netflix adaptation, they just show it at the end with Ozai and like some random Fire Nation aide of his, like, I don't know, his like lead informant. If you're gonna add these extra characters, at least put a name to them. But like they do that, and I'm just like, okay. The reason why I was kind of off-putting to me is like, and again, this is making me wonder, how are they going to handle future stuff of this? Because we learn through the animated show, it's like eventually you see how it works in the Fire Nation. It's a pure propaganda machine. The way these kids are brought growing up, like they believe that when they wiped out the air nomads, they fought an army. When Aang comes in with a little bit of a truth bomb, be like, they didn't have a proper army. But you could see like the way that they are bringing up their people, their kids, and like the subtle like mind control or like pushing their own narrative on it. You see that in the animated show. How are you going to do that? You kind of lose the illusion for me because I don't want to say it looks like it feels like he just learned about it, but you're telling me Ozai didn't know when this thing was coming back? I feel like the whole point was for him to figure out, like he would know when the comet's coming back and to plan around that. Like it's just there's, like you said, there's certain creative differences that they decided to make where it's just like, I'm sorry, it's not a matter of opinion. You did it wrong. You just did at the end of the day. Like, I don't know. Like, I'll say this. It's a good one-time watch. I'm not watching season 1 of this again on Netflix. I'm not. I can't. I'll probably find more stuff to get frustrated at if I do. It's a good one-time watch if you just want to see how they kind of did it. Again, the
Better
effects.
if you've never seen the original.
Honestly, yeah. Because if you see the original and then see this, you're going to be vastly disappointed.
You're going to be frustrated.
You're going to be frustrated. And if you get into the original, as much as it is important for the two of us, like, you're going to be frustrated because this is what, like, I'm not saying name the rest, Justin, but if right now if the two of us have to give our top 5 cartoons we watched growing up, Avatar, at least for me, is probably in my top 5. Like, I'm not asking you to give me a top 5 right now. That requires a lot more thorough thinking for both of us. But Avatar to me is in my top 5.
Avatar was one of my favorites when I was growing up, for sure.
So it's like you take a show that has this fan base, has this kind of like passionate people. Like, bro, there's subgroups on YouTube. Like, they will review so much of what the animated show is. They'll do, like, there's some YouTube channels that do amazing work at just helping build on the lore of the thing. I've watched YouTube videos that I learned stuff about Avatar as a whole, both the original series and then even stuff, because I'm be rich, I didn't watch Korra. But like, I learned a good amount of things because of these creators that love this stuff so much. And the fact that I feel like you're just kind of doing a disservice. Which, like you said, at the end of the day, if you want to tell your story, tell your story. Don't piggyback off of a story that was already great. And that's why I'm saying, if you weren't going to go all in on this Netflix and make sure that this was right from the get-go, I'd just rather have you not bothered making this a live adaptation and just have gone something else. Pick something else in Avatar to make a live adaptation. But Roku's life story, like that we saw in the 1 episode in season 3, make that an 8-episode thing. You could tell that through 8 episodes. The way his relationship with Sozin deteriorated, the way that he had to learn the other bendings, a little bit more situations where he had to step in as the most powerful person on the planet, and then maybe conversations between him and Kyoshi, because Kyoshi was supposed to be his like direct spiritual guide when he was the Avatar. Like, and then at the end, the betrayal, and like maybe give a bit of a preview of the long-term consequences of that. Of Roku wasn't heavy-handed enough with his friend because he still thought there was good in him. That's something you could tell in 8 episodes. You don't need multiple seasons for that. Like, it's one of those things. There's so much in this world to take. You don't need to limit yourself. It felt like they limited themselves, and what they tried to get creative with didn't hit. Just didn't. So it's disappointing to say, because like, after the debacle that was the movie, like, you could not be worse than it. And obviously, it's not worse. Like, like, if you ask me, watch Netflix Avatar or watch what M. Night Shyamalan did, I know that movie is less runtime, but there's a lot of cringe. So, if you can't say the main character's name properly, you lost me. Ain't that right, Ong? But at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where, like, I almost wish that Netflix is like, maybe let's not go on to season 2. It would suck, but like, for the actors and actresses from their point of view, because it would suck for them, because obviously, like, this could be a big break for some of these kids. And I hope they, like, again, I have no issues with the actors and actresses for the most part, but the way that they wrote around them, honestly, like, I feel like in a good amount of movies, if you have an issue with a character, don't blame the actor or actress. Look at the writing first. We're 2 media studies majors. We can tell you about this. Like, look at the writing first. Look how they wrote the character. Sometimes an actor or actress, at the end of the day, they can only work with what they were given. And it is what would you say, Justin? The top 2% of the actors and actresses in Hollywood and entertainment as a whole, realistic? Maybe it's a little bit more than that because it's such a massive amount of people. But like, only the top 2 or 3% have like actual sway, where if a writer puts something, they're like, no, I'm not doing this. Rewrite this.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm being generous with that number. I don't know, but I'm just saying, it's like these kids can't strong arm their way. Even the adult actors and actresses in this can't strong arm their way. They're going to work with this because it's cool. It's probably for them, some of them, a passion thing. But at the end of the day, the writers, you script. We should have known, because the original, I don't know if it was creators or writers from the animated show, like, they were part of the project at first, then they left. I think that was the preview of be like, oh, there's going to be some disappointment here.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah, that was not a good sign to say the least. That is that's our talk about the Netflix Avatar adaptation. Justin, look at that. What a way. It's going to rival the Harry Potter talk that me and Rick did, and the Harry Potter quiz that he and I did when we had our fun around this time last year. Maybe it was a little bit after. But yeah, I think that just about does it for this episode, Justin. I don't think there's too much more to talk about, really.
Unless you come up with something new, I'm tapped.
Nah, same, man. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. I know we basically went away from the sports for the last bit of it, but that's what the chaos is in the title for. It gives us an excuse to be able to have an episode like this where every once in a while we got to talk about something else. Maybe the sports, maybe the Pop Culture Agents of Chaos podcast will come out one day, and whether it's us or someone else, probably may not be us, but whether it's talking about more stuff like this, it's fun. And this is a once in a while thing, guys. It's been a year since me and Rick did something like this. A year. Maybe next time Rick and Justin have an episode when it's just the two of them, they can go off on a tangent similar to this about something else that they want to discuss. So it could be fun stuff like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a football-based podcast. You got the football for the first hour, hour 20 of the show, give or take. So we got to have a little bit of fun here at the end. Talk some NBA, talk some Netflix, talk some redone shows that maybe should have never been redone to begin with by Netflix. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the show. We will be back to the football talk next week, the pre-NFL draft episode of the show, because I just realized how quick it is forthcoming. The pre-NFL draft episode, we'll figure out something fun to do. We'll plan this out in the background. We will discuss it, and you will see what the episode is on the next edition of another podcast that will be filled with a football and chaos. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week.